What's up, everybody? This is Seth Paradin from the Unauthorized History of the Pacific War podcast here for a brief reminder, a quick reminder that John and I will be taking the show on the road this summer at the to the National Museum of the Pacific War's annual conference in October. We will be doing a Q&A, a live Q&A with the audience in attendance at the museum's conference on Friday night from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. on October 16th, 2026. If you are interested in joining us, and we would hope that you would be, we'd love to meet you guys and love to hang out with you guys for a little while. Please register at the museum's website down here and make sure you buy some tickets. And we would love to see you guys. It'd be a great pleasure to meet some of you people that have followed us for so many years. We'd love to do that, and we'd have a really good time in doing that very thing. So, again, please register and buy tickets to the museum's conference, October 15th. I'm sorry, October 16th and 17th, 2026, in Fredericksburg, Texas. And we hope to see you there. Hey guys, this is Seth Paradin here from the Unauthorized History of the Pacific War podcast. Like we did last week, we're combining two episodes. Part one, part two into one long continuous episode, and this one is going to be the battle for Wake Island. For whatever reason, a lot of people watched the first part but didn't watch the second part. I really don't understand why, because the story does continue. But either way, you get to see the whole thing here. It's a long one, but it's a good one, so enjoy. Hello, and welcome to episode 525 of the Unauthorized History of the Pacific War podcast. My name is Seth Paradin, historian and deputy director of the Mississippi Armed Forces Museum. And with me, as always, is my good buddy, co-host, and author and historian, John Marshall. How are you this fine September the 16th?
Doing all right. I was looking back last week on our midway footage episode, and I was feeling like I was a little flat. So my goal this week is to be a little more scintillating. I'm just gonna up the scent, which is why I'm wearing, again, the high energy red. I'm gonna get my Japanese Special Naval Landing Forces freak on. So yeah, I'm good. Oh, the other thing I want to do is also give a shout out.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, to my old salt friends who very kindly replaced my broken cup. So here I am, death to decaf. Granted, I'm drinking high test tea out of this and not coffee. Hope we're still friends, but nevertheless, thank you so much. Good
Yeah, but
dudes.
your wife drinks
So,
the coffee, though.
oh yeah, no,
There you
she
go.
loves that stuff. Got
That
the
counts.
haze gray thing. I'm looking at her right now. Anyway, she's over there. She's listening.
There you
Yeah.
go. There you go. Well,
as,
uh,
as little as possible, as she
well, I was
says.
going to say I apologize in advance because here we go.
Right.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, this is a topic, and we're going to break. So if you've seen the opening credits of this, it's already abundantly clear that we're breaking this into two parts. But we're breaking this topic into two parts because there's a lot to talk about, and it's something that people have wondered why we didn't do it to begin with.
Mm.
So we're going to do it here now, and it's a legendary story. So let's get into it. So it's a fly speck in the middle of the world's largest ocean, a desolate, God-forsaken hellhole without fresh water that no one wanted until they did. Discovered in 1568 by the Spanish, the three little islands were promptly dismissed by their discoverer as useless.
Useless.
For over 200 years, they were deemed useless by anyone who ran across them. The three small islands, grouped together in a semicircle with a lagoon in the middle of them, were considered nothing important, even when they were visited by the U.S. Navy in 1841. The U.S. naval officer, one Lieutenant Charles Wilkes, for whom one of the islands was named, dismissed the atoll as, quote, unfit for human habitation, unquote. Yet, in the infinite wisdom that is the United States military, that is exactly what they would become by the mid 1930s, a stopover on the route from Honolulu to Guam and points beyond. All 2,600 acres, some 2,000 miles west of Honolulu, 1,200 miles northeast of Midway, and 1,400 miles to the east from Guam, were home to a hotel and a few buildings, but mostly inhabited by hundreds of different seabirds and hundreds of thousands of rats. Aside
Where
from
did
that,
they come from?
uh, that's a whole nother story.
The Spaniards. Yeah, I don't know, or who,
Not
somebody.
quite
Anyway,
possible. It's
it could
quite
be.
possible.
Yeah, sorry.
Aside from that, the stopover was mostly a forgettable spot of brilliant white sand in the middle of the blue Pacific, and that was all until 1941. In the dark days after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, the entire focus, the entirety of the national attention span was focused on this small atoll. The fight being put up by the small band of United States Marines on both air and the land, aided immeasurably by civilian contractors, kept the rapt attention of the American populace. Dubbed the Alamo of the Pacific, Wake Island and the gallant defense thereon made its way into Marine Corps and American military legend, and rightfully so. This is a really it's it's
Yeah,
it's a story that, we always say this, but it's a God's honest truth. You think you know about it until you
right.
really know about it. I mean, this was not a walkover by any means, as the
Yeah,
Japanese are going to learn.
they're going to learn. Yeah.
Yeah.
And intriguingly too, just the fact that you and I were debating for a good 10 minutes before we actually were doing this thing on some of the stuff that we're going to be talking about in the next episode. The history on this is not at all clear in certain aspects, and which makes it, intriguing as well. So
There's a
anyway,
lot, yeah, and we'll get into it. And I don't know we're going to get into part of that discussion in this episode specifically. There's a lot of mythology that's been
hmm
passed on even during the war up until, well, still now. And
yeah,
we'll get into that here as we get through it. So in 1935, Pan American Airways, Pan Am, well, for those of us who remembered Pan Am,
yeah.
began a construction on a
That
stopover
dates us.
facility.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah, I remember Pan Am. I think that was my
Pioneer.
first flight as a kid. Anyway,
Really?
yeah, this facility for they wanted to build a stopover facility for the Clipper aircraft that were flying
hmm
from the United States to Honolulu to Guam and the Philippines and points they're on. And Wake
Yep.
was going to be one of those places. They sent 113 construction workers to Wake. And we're going to, by the way, we're going to consider Wake the entirety, all three islands. It's just going to be
Yeah.
easier to do that. And where specific islands are need to be mentioned, we will do that. Just so bear with us here.
Wake.
Um, they wanted to build a hotel, a restaurant, and facilities to maintain and repair the aircraft as they're coming in these clippers. And if you ever seen pictures of these clippers, these things are
They're
huge.
super cool. Yeah.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
They're neat. They're
Yeah. Really
massive
neat.
flying boats. Yeah,
Yeah.
but to build this, and I gave the mileage distance. It literally is in the middle of friggin' nowhere.
Yeah.
So to build anything out there, you got to hump this stuff from
Thousands
Hawaii
of miles
mostly.
away on a ship. Yep. You
Yeah,
got to haul it out of your hold and put it in lighters and bring it onto the beach. And yeah, there's nothing here. And you have to build it all from scratch. So,
yeah,
yep.
everything. And the islands themselves are not, you know, ready for any sort of construction. There's coral outcroppings on the beaches, like
Yep.
big coral boulders and things like that around the beaches, and so it's very difficult to get things ashore. And then in order to get in the lagoon, there were these coral heads in the lagoon, a la kind of like Tarawa, frankly, at certain aspects.
Yep.
There's coral heads where you can't get a friggin' boat in there to get the stuff
Right.
ashore to build. So there's, before you even bring anything ashore, you got to bring things to the island to blow things up to
Right.
bring things ashore. And that's
Yes.
exactly what happens. And this is not a project that's going to be like, we've got,
Overnight. No, they're
right.
working on this place for years to try to
Yeah.
turn it into a decent facility. They've got to dynamite all those coral heads out of the lagoon and yada, yada, yada. So, yeah, it
Mhm.
takes a while. By about 1937, there are enough Americans and Chamorros living on Wake Island to field two baseball teams. So now we know, yes, stuff's getting real here, right?
Yeah.
Uh, the Caucasians ran the Pan Am facility, and the Chamorros acted as labor. 2 evenings a week by 1937, one of these Pan Am clippers is coming in and landing in the lagoon. But aside from that, there's not a lot of visitors coming in here. But that's
Mhm.
going to change as war clouds start darkening. So,
There you go.
yeah,
There you go.
a little
Got to throw that one
gratuitous.
in there.
Heck yeah. Again, that's for my editor because it would drive him crazy. Yeah.
So, stepping back a few weeks when we talked about FDR's preparation for war, actually several
Yeah.
weeks now, um, this development of weight kind of falls into that realm. In 1938, as the war clouds are darkening and the ships are being constructed and the blueprints are being drawn and blah, 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 blah. One of the aspects of that whole buildup is the United States Navy wanted to establish more bases,
Yep.
specifically in the Pacific, for not necessarily stopovers, but for outer defensive bases and
Yep.
potentially offensive springboards as well.
Yep.
And this kind of falls into that, the Hepburn note. It was this, Claude Swanson was SecNav at the time, and he assigned Admiral Arthur Hepburn the job of find me some places where we can build some bases, make me a
Right.
list, and we'll go from there. Well, he comes up with about 18 locations, of which Wake is actually number three on that
Hmm.
list behind Pearl as number one and Midway as number two. Wake
Number
is the
two.
third. So
Yep.
it's
Well, and that makes sense
significant.
because if you consider that the Japanese defensive positions in the Marshalls, which is the island group that is just to the
Mhm.
west of Wake, that's where we're thinking this big decisive sea battle is likely to happen on our way, in War Plan Orange to go and relieve the Philippines. So obviously, we would like to have Wake to be, if nothing else, a good base for our PBY Catalinas to be doing scouting operations in advance of the fleet into the Marshalls in preparation for that sort of a battle. And by this point, too, in 1937, the Japanese would have withdrawn from the naval treaty system. And
Mhm.
so, kind of all bets are off in terms of the previous provisos of those naval treaties that said you can't fortify any of these islands that are out in the Pacific. But at this point, this it's all kind of moved. So we could even build this place up under the guise of, yeah, we're just beefing up the Pan Am Clipper station here, but gee,
Yeah.
that's a flying boat and PBYs are a flying boat. And so if we've got the facilities to keep a Clipper operating, we've also now got the facilities to keep a bunch of PBYs up and humming too.
And that
So
is precisely what they do, or what they
yeah.
try and do.
Yep.
Money is allocated in 1939, excuse me, by the federal government to do this for
Yep.
the Navy. $7.5 million is
Which is real money
allocated.
back in the day.
That's a
Yeah.
that's a lot of money back
That's a
then.
chunk of change. Yep.
It is, and they wanted to. They're giving this money to the U.S. Navy to build Wake into, as I put, something useful for the
Yep.
U.S. Navy, and as I put in the notes, hurry the hell up with it too, because
Yeah.
war clouds are darkening. So for months and months and months, typical of the federal government, um, it just kind of hung out in limbo. The money just it was allocated, but it wasn't given to them, and it was just kind of floating in the nether out there
Mm.
until none other than Carl Vinson came in and slung it under the table in 1940. So almost, I think it's like 11
Yeah.
months and some change after
Right. So we've
he got it.
lost a year at this point,
Yes, yes.
which has interesting implications for the battle that ends up happening there. Because you look at that lost time and you just think to yourself,
Yeah,
damn, if
yeah.
we'd had more in the way of fixed defensive positions and particularly more in the way of manpower. Granted, that was going to be hard to get too. Um, but yeah, we this for all of the initial advances, I'm sort of fast forwarding here.
Mhm.
The Japanese were very successful in their first phase offensives, but I personally feel like with a little more effort and a little more manpower on our part, and frankly a little more luck, we could have held on to Wake Island. Spoiler alert. So
Yeah,
anyway,
absolutely. And when we
yeah,
cover that next week, we can get into that and the
yeah,
reasons why. And one of the reasons why is we're gonna talk about it here in just a few minutes. But so the Navy, to be 100% clear, and this is very, very important because this plays a large role in what happens in December 1941. The U.S. Navy is not going to build this base. The
hmm,
U.S. Navy is not going to send engineers out there. They're not, it's not going to happen. They're not going to do that. That's not what the Navy is for. They are going to hire civilian contractors to, and it's not just one company, although it does kind of fall under the purview of one company. It's a consortium. It's a
yeah,
bunch of different companies that are coming together to build all of these naval bases,
yep,
like all across the Pacific and a few in the Atlantic and the Caribbean and things like that in the
yep.
Panama Canal
Up
Zone.
in Alaska too. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So it's it's important to note that because these civilians are going to play a tremendous role in the
yeah,
event that comes through. In 1939, speaking of the Navy or the Naval Department, the United States Marines had planned for a 510-man garrison on Wake. That's what they planned for. Um, and this is important here too because of this stuff has to be shipped over there because most of this
yep.
construction starts taking place in 1940, even though the money's allocated, as we
38.
said. So
Yeah,
510 dudes with three batteries of 3-inch guns of 4 guns each,
Yep.
three 5-inch shore batteries of 2 guns each, 24 50 caliber machine guns, 24 30 caliber machine guns, and your various small arms and different things like that.
Yeah, so as I
And
break that down, you've got probably half of those guys are allocated to the coastal batteries, and you've probably got about a company or two of infantry sort of backing that up. That's who's going to be manning those lighter automatic weapons and that kind of stuff. So
you would think,
yes,
but as we'll see,
yeah,
not
exactly.
necessarily the way.
Yeah.
So in late 1940, and by late I mean December, laborers, construction workers, engineers, civilians, all from this consortium, they ship out, and I do mean ship out from Honolulu to Wake to begin the construction of the Naval Air Station, or as I put
Hmm.
NAS,
Hmm.
an airfield. They're going to build an airfield, a seaplane base, a submarine base, and buildings that support
Yeah,
those type of facilities.
it's
So they
pretty
send out a,
ambitious.
it
Yeah,
is, and they send out a ton of crap out there.
yeah. 2,000 tons of supplies because yeah, if you're going to build a base, you got to get legit. We put on the Navy transport the William Ward Burroughs. This includes trucks, tractors, bulldozers, dynamite, lumber, etc., as well as the barges that are going to be towed behind it, which are going to be able to move that material to the shore, and 1,146 civilian construction workers. And so construction finally kicks off on January 8th, 1941.
Which is again the loss of time here.
Yep.
And there was only, and we're going to see, I'm going to read a quote here, or one of us will read a quote here in a minute about from husband Kimmel, who
Mm.
realized that Wake was actually going to be potentially something very important in a war. So keep in mind the money was allocated in 38, and it wasn't until Vincent
Beginning of 41 that we actually had.
shoves it through. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I mean that's a lot of time that's lost here.
Yes, it is.
So the fellow, the civilian contractor who is in charge of this whole shebang is a guy named Nathan Dan Teeters. He went by Dan Teeters. That was he preferred his middle name, I guess. He
Yeah.
was a native of Ohio. He was an Army veteran. He'd been in the Army for, I want to say, like 8 or 9 years. He'd been around for a while. He was a stubborn dude, feisty, and as a naval officer that served with him, all Wake said, was someone who would be good to have along in a fight. And he will be. He will be.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, he's a very experienced engineer. He works for the Morrison Knudsen Company, which is a
Mhm.
construction company from Texas, which helped build the Boulder Dam and was also the leading company amongst this consortium. So they're the primary contractors, and everybody else are subcontractors
Right.
through Morrison Knudsen. And so Teeters answers only to the Navy officer who's actually in charge of the base there. And at the time, this is Lieutenant Commander Elmer Sweeney, who generally tried to stay out of Teeters' hair during the construction process. So, for all that the Navy is in charge, the bottom line is that Teeters'
Yeah.
word is basically law.
Mhm.
And his men really liked him.
Yeah. Yeah. He
So,
was a good dude. He's a great big old boy too, from all, and you see pictures of him post-war, and he's I guess I spoiled the story there. He does survive, but
yeah,
he's a pretty good sized fella. So he's one of those guys that could run a construction company with an iron fist if he
yeah,
had to, but he didn't have to. And as far going back to what you were saying about Lieutenant Commander Sweeney, yeah, he's the military representative, the Navy representative on the island there, but he's not in charge of anything because there's nothing to be in charge of because Teeters is
right.
building the
Yeah.
things that he's going to be in charge of. So as construction proceeded, and that's one thing, is even though they started in January 41, they do get a lot of stuff built pretty quick. I mean, with
Mm,
1,100 dudes on 2,600 acres of ground, there's a lot of stuff that's flying around in
yeah.
terms of construction, and they do get things moving pretty quick. So at the time, SINCPAC was Admiral Husband Kimmel, who we talked about extensively in the last several weeks. He saw the importance of Wake as both an offensive stopover, like you were saying, on any kind of counteroffensive that's going to go towards the Marshall Islands,
Yep.
and as a defensive strong point in a future war with Japan. On April 18th, 1941, Kimmel wrote to Stark, Betty Stark, and he said, quote,
Betty.
if Wake be defended, then for the Japanese to reduce it, it would require extended operations of their naval forces in an area where we might be able to get at them.
Yep.
We should try by every possible means to get the Japanese to expose their naval units. In order to do this, we must provide objectives that require exposure, unquote, which is a very interesting quote here.
Yeah. Yeah, no, he is we've talked in some of the Japanese naval planning about this whole notion of bait forces, right?
Yes.
That we're going to trail our coats out here and here's something juicy, come and get it. And, Wake is essentially the same animal in Kimmel's mind, that he
Mhm.
was very offensively oriented. And so it's only 2,000 miles from here to Honolulu. That's, a relatively short jaunt for the naval forces we have based at Pearl. So if Wake can become the focus of a major fleet engagement where we can start the process of wearing down the Imperial Navy at the beginning of a war, that'd be great. And so to that end, we want to make Wake as much of a little hedgehog as we can to induce the Japanese to try to reduce it so that we can fight a fleet action there.
Yeah, a tough nut. They want to make it as tough of a nut to crack as they
Yep.
possibly can to
Yep.
hold the Japanese in one place, for as long.
Yep.
And to that end, Kimmel urged Betty Stark to send as many Marines as he could within reason to the island no later than June the 1st, 1941.
Mm-hmm.
Stark had orders cut, or actually Kimmel technically had orders cut to send the 1st Marine Defense Battalion to Wake Island, quote, as soon as practicable. It wouldn't be, it would be 2 more months, however,
Yeah.
before those guys arrive. And even then, it wasn't the entire defense battalion. It was only 173 enlisted men and 5 officers. And they reach Wake on August the 19th.
Yep.
So
And
things are
yeah,
not
that's
moving quickly.
again, that's roughly a company. And this is one of those places where if you look at this campaign through the soda straw, it inevitably makes people go, well, why didn't they send more people out there? It's just like because everybody needed everything and they needed it right now. And there were
Right.
many other bases that also needed Marines. At this point in time, there's not so much as a fully constituted Marine division in the entire
Correct.
theater.
Correct.
So we're having to do things in penny packets, and we just ain't got a full battalion to send out to Wake at this point in time. Damn it.
Yeah.
Would that we had, but yeah, this is what we got: 173 guys.
Yeah. On October the 15th, 1941, Wake Island's Marine Force receives their commanding officer. He's a Marine major, obviously, named James Patrick Sinnott Devereaux.
Mm-hmm.
He arrives on site. He's an 18-year Marine veteran. He was assigned to take command of the 1st Defense Battalion, train them into fighting shape. And again, some of these, you got to remember, few of these guys have maybe seen some combat in the Banana Wars or things like that, or maybe
Right.
even World War One. But the vast majority of these dudes in the 1st Marine Defense Battalion are 17, 18,
18,
19
19.
years old. They're
Yeah.
young, young, young men. And Devereaux, that's like his specialty. He's an artillery guy. He's known to be an artillery guy, and he is a taskmaster. He's going to whip you into shape. He might not
Yeah.
make a lot of friends doing it,
There may be tears, but
but there will be tears. But when he's done,
yeah.
he's going to have a force, and this was a known thing. That's why he was sent out there.
Yeah.
Um, that when he's done, he's going to have a force that's going to be, I don't want to say competitive, but it's going to be worth their
Competent.
time. Yeah,
Yeah.
competent. Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
he wasn't a
He's
micromanager. He's just going to
right.
get the job
He's a
done.
trainer.
Yeah.
He's a taskmaster, no nonsense. He's
Mhm.
respected, but he's not exactly the kind of guy you want to have a beer with at the bar.
Mm-mm.
Um, so not terribly charismatic, but yeah, he knew what he was doing when it came to a training standpoint, and he was certainly again he was a respected individual.
Yeah,
So
very, very much so. And he trained the hell out of these people.
12 hours a
When
day.
12 hours a day, nearly every day. And I say nearly every day because when they weren't training, they were building defensive positions because
Right.
Devereaux was not stupid. He knew that if the Japanese do come this way, more than likely we're going to be the first speed bump in the road if
Right.
they come this way, which not a lot of people, we talked that,
Sure.
it might be an outpost, but, or might be a stopping post for the Japanese, but he had them training 12 hours a day, and if they weren't training, as I said, they're digging holes and they're
Yeah.
digging revetments and are building revetments and they're digging defensive positions and things like that. Um,
The problem being that there isn't a lot of construction material
there's
that's
nothing.
dedicated exactly, which means that you cannot, get overhead cover in a lot of cases to these positions. Where basically this is a glorified exercise in filling sandbags and building little outposts like that.
Yeah,
So again, that lost time figures prominently because if we'd actually had the ability to put reinforced concrete positions on this island, it would have made the Japanese undertaking a lot worse than it actually was. But again,
absolutely.
you
Yeah.
know, this is the state of American defense before this war. We're scrambling everywhere and we just don't have enough stuff. So
Yeah,
it
you
goes.
can only do what
What
you
you can
can
do.
with what you have. Yeah, and that's
Yep.
it.
Yep.
So as the Marines are digging these holes and and building emplacements for their AA guns and different things like that, that's all being done under Dan Teeters' tutelage because most of these guys are, as I said, kids,
Yeah.
and he's kind of looking saying, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. But and this is the important part. So defense battalions, Marine defense battalions in 1941 called for 939 enlisted men and 43 officers. That's according to the United States Marine Corps in 1941. That's what they were supposed to have. They
1,000
were
guys.
defensive battalions to
Yep.
defend bases, but they were never expected to hold out for like a long period of time.
Hmm.
That's what your infantry regiments are for. And the thing with Wake is that it was never, ever slated to receive a Marine infantry battalion at any time at
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
prior to the war. Never.
Yeah. Yeah. These formations are, again, primarily designed to ward off an amphibious landing. I mean, they've got a fair amount in the way of surface to surface gunfire, but yeah, they're not real heavy on pure infantry formations. Meaning that if the Japanese get ashore and you actually have to go toe to toe in a small unit action, you don't have enough of those small units to go around.
Yeah.
That said, fast forwarding to Guadalcanal, I mean, we brought along a base defense force, along with that precisely to defend the landing beaches against the Japanese counter landing. That's what that group on Guadalcanal is for. That's kind of what they're here to do on Wake as well, repel an amphibious landing. But yeah, they don't have enough guys in the ranks bearing small arms and automatic weapons necessarily to fight off a serious infantry action. So
Wow. No.
there you go.
So Devereaux, if he'd had enough dudes, he envisioned stationing an entire battalion on each island to properly defend them. However, he didn't have enough guys. And
Yeah,
on November the 1st and November the 2nd, excuse me, 1941, Wake got the last Marine riflemen it would ever get when they were dropped off by the USS Castor. Instead of nearly, as I put in the notes, 1,000 men under his command, Devereaux had exactly 373 enlisted men and 15 officers, which
yeah,
is
not
significantly less than
yeah,
what
yeah, a
the
third of his established TO. So
yeah,
so it
yeah,
goes. So yeah, he hasn't got enough guys to man all the anti-aircraft guns. He hasn't got enough guys to man even all the 50 calibers. Only 6 of the 12 AAA guns could be manned, and the machine guns, which he had a lot of, again, he can only man about half of those. So the only positions on this island that are manned at full strength are that group of 5-inch shore batteries. How many? There's 6 guns total, right? Is that correct?
Oh man, I got to go back to the notes.
Oh God,
Let's
here we
see.
are just shooting ourselves in the foot. Here we said it.
Three
Yes,
5-inch shorter batteries of
of
two each.
two
So yes,
of 2 guns
six.
apiece, so 6 guns.
Yeah,
Yep. Yeah.
yeah,
All right.
yeah. Um, we talked about equipment and the Marines, God knows, they got firearms. They
Yeah.
never lack for firearms. But one of the things that they do not have for to any real degree is fire control equipment
Right.
for a lot of these things. They do have some rangefinders. They have what's called a coincidence rangefinder, I think, on two of the batteries, 5-inch shore
Hmm.
batteries, and but they don't have anything for the AAA. Nothing.
Right. Which means you're
So
firing over open sights, and that's a much yeah, less effective way of getting things done against aircraft. So
as we're going to see.
yeah,
So the worst part, and this is something that's going to play, foreshadowing that's going to play a huge role in how Wake actually does come out, is communications.
yep,
Uh, the communications initially in the beginning of the campaign or the fight are actually fairly well, they're good. But as things divulge, as the situation becomes worse, they rapidly get worse because the only way these guys had to communicate to one another across these three islands was telephones.
right.
And these ain't cell phones. These are like you're laying the wire to get
Hmm.
from A to B and
Yep,
C to D. And because of the late arrival of a lot of their equipment and the Marines themselves, they did not have time to properly bury these wires.
yeah,
And they are quite literally laying along the side of the dang road, so any Japanese with a knife can walk up and go and cut them,
yoink.
and
Yep,
then you're done. That's it.
yeah.
You're out.
And they're
And
vulnerable, of course, to
er,
artillery fire as
right.
well. Any sort of a preparatory bombardment. So yeah, the fact that we don't have enough radios on this island means that it's even though this is a fairly small place, 2,200 acres grand total. That is actually a fair amount of real estate. It is not. It's not like Devereaux sitting in his command post can physically see every point on this island.
Can't.
And
Yeah.
so, yeah, if your comms are not good, that's going to make it very difficult to coordinate your defense against the Japanese.
And to know what the heck is going on, as we
Yep.
shall see.
Yep.
So up to the 28th of November, Devereaux was the top banana. He was the man on Wake Island. However, on that date, he is, I don't want to say relieved because that's not the proper term, but he is usurped. And if you will, he gets outranked by a gentleman who
Yep.
comes in, and this is a naval officer who is sent to Wake to be the commanding officer of the NAS once it opens up, which is rapidly approaching. This guy is an enigma because
Yeah.
you some accounts of Wake and he's a hero, and other accounts of Wake he's a dog, and it is what it
Yeah.
is.
Commander Winfield Scott Cunningham. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, he's the guy who's going to be in charge of the Naval Air Station. But, right out of the gate, you can see that this is a naval officer. He's not an infantry officer. And so he's far more interested in how do I keep my birds up and running
Yes.
on the airfield than he is necessarily around the defense of this island per se. And he seems fairly checked out when he arrives. So he comes onto the island, and it's pretty clear from the outset that he does not want to be there. Doesn't like his
So,
assignment. He's out in the boonies. Um, Part of the personal kit that he brings along with him are his golf clubs, his dress blues, and various other accessories. This is not the kind of place where you're going to be doing a lot of golfing, my dude. And so he, gets into a car, tours the defenses, goes to Devereaux afterwards, tells him that the positions are not good, and that's pretty much all the advice he gives them. He then uh, basically calls it a day. So
yeah,
the initial the initial tea leaves are not great in terms of the working chemistry between these two individuals.
not at all. And as we're going to see, especially when the next week when we talk about the land campaign, if you will,
Yeah,
Devereaux is very respectful of the pecking order.
yeah,
He's your typical Marine Corps officer. He's very respectful of rank, but he also is aware of the fact that Cunningham is completely out of touch with the way
right.
things are going to go, and he's going to make calls on his own, which are good, and then some things that result in other ways. So, speaking of the NAS, the Naval Air Station, the same day that Cunningham arrives on Wake, Marine Fighting Squadron 211, VMF 211, left of a mooring mast on Oahu and flew aboard CV-6, aboard the Big E. They'd been told, this is kind of crappy. They told these pilots that they were just going out for training missions. In other words, they're just going out on the Enterprise probably to conduct, carrier landings and da 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 da
Right,
da da da. All you need is you know, your skivvies,
right.
couple of
A, tooth,
uniforms, toothbrush, and
a
shaving kit.
toothbrush, you should be good.
You'll be good to go. You'll be back in a few days. Eh. When they
Eh.
get, when they get aboard Enterprise, the only guy that knew that they were not that was malarkey was their CO, Major Paul Putnam. Um, when the 12 F4 F3s land on USS Enterprise, they are then told of their mission. Oh, by the way, you guys are going to Wake Island,
Yeah.
and this is where you're going to stay.
I don't
Um,
understand the reason for the secrecy here. This just baffles me. I
I
mean,
don't get it.
yeah,
I don't get it. It doesn't
we're
make
not
any
even
sense
gonna
to
let
me at
these
all.
guys pack a duffel bag. I mean, what the hey?
I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know. I don't get
Anyway,
it either. It doesn't make any sense to me because there's no war on right now. And I
yeah,
mean, it's not like we hid the efforts to build Wake, so whatever, it is what
right.
it is. So on the 4th of December, 1941, 200 miles away from Wake Island, we know the story what happens to Enterprise. She launches her fighters. This is VMF 211. And it's about a 2 hour flight and once they form up and they go, about a 2 hour flight to Wake Island. For the fighters, they're escorted by one PBY. So
Mm-hmm.
they can
Navigational.
find their way
Yep.
to Wake. Um, Putnam puts down on Wake Island. He's obviously the first fighter to land on Wake Island. He's surrounded, and after his guys, the chicks come to roost after him. They're surrounded by all these civilians and the Marines, and they're cheering. And this is a big
Mm,
deal, because now
yep.
ostracized, now they have some sort of offensive punch power. God
Right.
forbid if something was to start.
Yep. So Putnam is fairly experienced, although not terribly experienced in the F4F necessarily. But he's flown pretty much everything from Ford Tri-Motors up to the F4F, and has won commendations along the way for his leadership. He's a good guy, pretty caring individual, despite the fact that he couldn't tell them to pack a duffel bag.
Yeah,
He's well liked by his men. His executive officer is a guy named Henry T. Elrod from Thomasville, Georgia.
bad
36 years
dude.
old. Elrod is much older than most of the men under his command. And between Elrod Putnam and Elrod's best friend, Captain Frank Theron, the three of those guys are the three most experienced aviators amongst this dozen. Most of these pilots are officers, but there are actually two enlisted pilots amongst the ranks as well.
Mhm.
Just like the ground troops here, who are very young men, VMF 211 likewise is a very green unit. They've never dropped a bomb before, they've never fired their weapons in their F4F. And on average, they only have 30 hours in type in that aircraft, which is not a lot, and that
Mhm.
that includes Putnam and Elrod. So these guys are just brand new behind the stick. I
Yeah.
mean, again, fast forwarding to sort of the shaking of the head that we give to the Japanese kamikaze pilots, and only got 50 hours, grand total stick time and no time practically in type. That's the same situation that we have
Yeah.
here with VMF 211.
Yeah, I mean these guys are, as you said, they're as green as grass. And I don't remember the exact date that the F4 F3 came out, but I mean it hadn't been out, and by
All
out I
that
mean
long.
assigned to units. It hadn't been out that damn long. So
Yep.
the fact that they even had them
Yeah.
is a good thing. But I mean you can
Yeah, I mean, at
also,
least you're not flying buffaloes, which
yes,
you
which
could well have been.
you dang right you could have been.
Yeah.
And the, I guess that I don't want to speculate, but that almost kind of says, the importance of this, that the Marines are getting, that 211's getting their F4Fs and their brand spanking new when they go out there.
Yeah.
Um, another thing that I found to be rather sad, frankly, is that the mechs, the mechanics, the ground crew had never even worked on these airplanes before.
Hmm.
So they
Yeah.
didn't know what the hell. There were no manuals, and this is it's like every book about Wake Island. These guys didn't know. I mean, they're mechanics, so they know how to work on an aircraft.
Right.
But
They know
it's
what a radial aircraft engine is, but yeah, I
right.
haven't seen this
But
one
they're all
before.
different. They're
Yeah,
all different, and it's going to play a
exactly.
big deal. And when these guys get here, the
Yeah.
fighters are there, and the mechs are there, and the ground crew's there, and they got ammunition. They don't have any friggin' spare parts.
Yeah. No spare parts,
Nothing.
not a lot of maintenance facilities. And the other thing that's missing here is revetments for the aircraft.
Yes.
So for those who are not in the know about what a revetment is, it's a beveled series. You can make it out of sandbags if you want to. Concrete or earth is better, but you want to have some sort of a defensive position around that aircraft to protect it from fragmentation and that sort of thing from
Right.
three sides. And you want to have those remnants relatively spread out, if at all possible, to reduce, if a bomb hits one plane, we don't want it to, cascade and damage the planes that are around it. We ain't got any of that at this point. We got a bare landing strip and some concrete places to put these aircraft. That's what we're looking at.
And that was Putnam's biggest beef when
Yeah,
he landed. He's looking for the revetments, and they were building them,
sure.
but they were
But
not ready.
right, we're building a
And
lot of things at this point. Yeah.
exactly. And he's looking around and he's like, where the hell am I going to park these damn things? Because he knows why they're out there.
Yep.
And he's like, we get hit. This is going to be a bad situation real quick.
Yep.
So the day he lands, he immediately goes to Cunningham and reports to Cunningham because that's the CO. He goes to report to Cunningham and says, look, this is my idea. This is what I think we ought to do. We need to put up, first of all, I need to train these people. They need more hours in these aircraft, number one. Number two, what do we have in terms of search? To which Cunningham says, nothing. They got
Right.
nothing. There is no radar, even though Wake was assigned, I think, at least one, if not two, of
Hmm.
the mobile radar stations, but they're quite literally sitting on the pier in Pearl Harbor or somewhere in Oahu waiting to be shipped out. And of course, as we know, they never get there. So the only way, two ways that these guys can learn that the Japanese theoretically may come is if Putnam's people see them in the air
Yeah. Yep.
and look out, spot them from the air. Um, and by that I mean Devereaux stations guys in these watchtower things that are the highest point on the island with
Yep.
binoculars and says, if you see any airplanes, let us
Let
know.
us know. Yeah.
Let us know. So
Which is not much in the way of an early warning system. Yeah.
no, no,
So,
no.
oh well.
So Putnam was going to start his patrolling actions the following day, or I'm sorry, a few days later, after he does a few training and like orientation flights.
Right.
That date would be Monday, December the 8th, 1941. Um, you got to remember, Wake sits on the other side of the international date line.
Yep.
So while it's Sunday, December 7th in Pearl Harbor, it's Monday, December 8th in Wake.
Hmm.
That day, the Sunday, so it has to be December 6th, the United States time. Devereaux gives his guys the day off. First day off they'd had in like a month or two.
Yeah.
They have a barbecue. There's some warm beer that finds its way out there, and the guys just kind of chill and relax.
Yeah.
And they have a time to basically, take a breath. Devereaux wrote of this day, of that day, he wrote, and I quote, "If we had time to get ready, well and good. If we didn't, we'd have to make do with what we had. Meanwhile, there is no use fretting." And he wrote those words on December the 7th. All right, so shortly after 0800, wonder why, Wake received word of the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. And everybody thinks, there's all United States Navy, United States Marine Corps, and civilians on Wake Island. No, there were Army people there as well. The man who actually receives word of the attack on Pearl Harbor is none other than Army Staff Sergeant Ernest Rogers. He was manning one of the Army's portable radio stations that were on the island. And as soon as he receives the message it's sent out from Hickam in the clear, he
Hmm.
immediately scribbles it down, gets in a motorcycle, and flies over to his boss, who is Army Captain Henry Wilson. Wilson immediately reads the message that is handwritten down on this piece of paper, bursts out of the door, runs over to Devereaux's quarters, which are like, I don't know, 50 yards away, probably.
Right. How many Army guys are there on here?
Not many. There's only about a half a dozen guys. There's only
Okay.
about a half a dozen, and they're manning the radio stations. That's the only reason that they're
That's the
there.
only thing they're doing.
Is it?
Okay.
That is it. That is it.
All right.
So when he runs into Devereaux's quarters, Devereaux's shaving. He's in there. He's got lather all over half of it, actually half of his face. He'd shaved half of his face when he
Cute.
comes running in with the news.
Right.
Devereaux reads the message, runs outside, and this is one of the few comical moments of the entire operation right here. As he's running out the door, he grabs his bugler, who was a gentleman named Alvin Wankler.
Perfect.
And field
Mwah.
music, yeah, field music, I think third class, Alvin Wankler. And he was known like throughout the Corps as the worst bugler in the United States Marines. Like this guy couldn't blow anything on that bugle. So
Right.
he Devereaux runs out there, grabs Walker and says, "Blow call to arms, we need these people need to move."
Right.
And either because he was nervous or he's caught off guard,
Right.
he literally blew every tune known to man except call to arms.
Arms.
And he's like given, as they called it, an erratic concert because all these Marines are standing there going, "What in the hell is he
What
doing?"
are you doing? Yeah.
Finally, at the end, he remembered how to play. I guess it just flashed in his mind how to play general quarters, all that jazz. Once he starts doing that, the Marines are they're still standing there like,
Is this legit?
yeah,
Yeah.
what the hell? I mean, this guy's just blowing, you know,
Rando notes here. Right.
yeah. And all of a sudden he's playing GQ. What the hell are we supposed to do? Devereaux climbs up on top of like a sandbag bunker or something
Yeah.
and just starts screaming and hollering because he sees that nobody's moving. Everybody's just standing there. And he
Right.
starts screaming and goes, "This is no drill. This is no drill. Pass the damn word," or his exact words.
Yeah.
And at that moment, people start running around and getting things going.
Alvin Wonkler, the paraphrase, "You're killing me, Smalls."
Yeah.
Right. Come on, man. The
Yeah.
one time I needed GQ out of you and I can't get it.
Yeah, and it's
Uh,
it's a known thing. It was like he
right.
was known to be, and he admitted it. Like, yeah, it
He's,
was terrible.
I
He
was
was the
terrible.
worst bugler in the Corps. So there was a guy named, and you're going to hear about him in the next episode more. A guy named Wiley Sloman. Good name too, by the way.
Mhm.
He was a Marine, young man. I think he was 19 at the time. He was in one of the mess tents eating chow. When he hears the erratic concert, and he's
Yes.
sitting there, he's like, "What in the hell is going on?" And his sergeant comes flying into the mess tent and is like, "Move, this is real. Let's move." So he
Yeah.
wraps a sausage in a pancake, grabs 3 bandoliers of ammunition, and just runs.
Pigs in
Just
a
go.
blanket, man after my own heart. It's like,
That's
okay,
it.
I'm gonna move, but I'm taking some chow with me because I don't know when the next time is I'm gonna be eaten, and
Yeah,
certainly
yeah.
don't want to let these sausages go to waste here. So anyway,
I'd have been stuffing them in my pockets.
yeah,
So Cunningham, as soon as all this goes down, Cunningham, who had been out of touch, he does get word relatively quickly, and it's not by radio or anything like that. He hears it by word of mouth just as not long after Devereaux starts literally jumping up and down, screaming to say, "Hey, damn it, this is what's going on." Dan Teeters, who had not met Devereaux, or not Devereaux,
Putnam,
Cunningham,
yeah,
until that day,
okay,
bursts into Cunningham's office and says, "Hey, I'm Dan Teeters. What can I do to help?" And that is going to be a significant thing because what Cunningham did not know, or at least at the very least he was relatively unaware of it, is that Devereaux and Teeters had worked out some sort of gentleman's agreement, if you will, to bolster the Marine defenses with civilians.
mm-hmm.
And the only civilians that were going to be allowed to do anything at this time, this changes, at this time are ex-military,
Mm-hmm.
of which there were about 150-ish.
Right,
And these guys are going to, as I put in the notes, train with the Marines on the sly. And because as we know, civilians legally
can't,
can't.
yeah,
And these guys are going to be carrying ammunition. They're going to act as stretcher bearers, different things like that, should the
yeah,
need arise, God forbid.
right.
Um,
Yeah, because bottom line is if you're a civilian and you act in a military capacity, all bets are off in terms of your treatment if you get captured and that kind of thing.
yes.
You want to be in uniform in order for the not that the Japanese obey international law, but in a perfect world, if they did, yeah, you don't want to be a civilian in that capacity. You would prefer to be a soldier. But nevertheless,
Yeah.
it's clear that Teeters has an understanding of, we're all in this together.
Yeah.
And, every able bodied man we need to be utilizing to the maximum effect. And so if that means lugging around ammunition to the emplacements or acting as stretcher bearers or what have you, then we're going to do that.
And that's, it's It's very admirable, frankly, because none of
Yeah,
those guys had to do that. But as you said, they all know that they're in the same boat unless they can actually, no pun intended, get on a boat
a boat
and
and
get the
get
heck
out of
out
here.
of there.
Yeah,
But I found this interesting. I put this in here. So Teeters at that point makes it known to say, like, I got 150 dudes here who are willing to do whatever they need to do
yeah.
to help everybody out here. At that point, Cunningham and his executive officer, Elmer Gray,
Hmm.
decided to not tell anybody else on Wake that Pearl Harbor had just been attacked. He tells Teeters, don't tell anybody else. Let those guys get to work. Let them do, whatever it is they had on their docket that day.
I just don't
And
understand the reasoning for that.
I don't either. I don't
Yeah.
either because as we're going to see here rapidly, a lot of those guys probably would not have been hurt had they
Yes.
been told to
Right.
find some
Take
cover or
shelter and
something.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. There's a
yeah,
war on.
exactly. So, as we were saying just a minute ago, John, the only early warning system they're going to have are Putnam's F4Fs, which he puts four in the air almost immediately.
Four of his
And
12, and that makes sense. You can only keep about a third of your planes up at any given time anyway. So yeah, that's what you're
Mhm.
going to do.
And the guys up in the watchtowers, and they're like we said, they're 18-year-old Marines with binocs, and that's it.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Putnam and dispersing the fighters because this is a huge thing. He had debated initially internally on what to do with the fighters to disperse, whether to disperse them, even though they didn't have any revetments or partially completed, or keep them to where they can get after them quickly. And it doesn't really work out for the best. Construction workers had begun, they'd been working on revetments, but none of them were finished. And you're going to say, oh, well, the Japanese had revetments. Yeah, well, they put the civilians to work on the revetments after they captured the island, as you're going to know. But none of his fighters, none of Putnam's fighters are under any kind of cover at all. So, and he has them, I don't want to say clustered, they're not wingtip to wingtip, but he figured maybe we ought to disperse them a little bit better. But where the hell are we going to put them? Because there was no place to put them. He figured that the only thing that could be done to disperse those fighters was to keep four in the air all the time.
Hmm.
And that would leave,
Only
4 hour
eight on the
patrol.
ground.
Right, exactly. So it's the best he can do at the time. And he felt that rightly, as you talked about earlier, that the Marshall Islands, if the Japanese are going to come, which we know now they have come to Pearl Harbor, that if they're going to come, they're probably going to come from the Marshall Islands because that is the closest Japanese
Yep.
bastion to Wake Island. And in that event, he's going to tell his fighters that are in the air at that time to patrol in that general vicinity,
Direction. Yep.
to keep your eyes peeled. And if you see anything coming at them, get on it.
Right.
So sure enough, not long after this, there are four fighters in the air, one of which is Henry T. Elrod. There's three other aircraft with him. They're on patrol. They spot two formations of V's some 10,000 feet below them.
Mm.
Um, and even though he's got the height advantage, as we're going to see, everything happens so fast, and he spotted them. It's not his fault, but he spotted them too damn late. These aircraft are Nels, and we
Yep.
talked about this with Justin Pike.
Yeah.
These are the This is widely used aircraft.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the G3M it was the predecessor to the G4M Betty. But yeah, Anel is still, a reasonably modern aircraft at this point in time, and they were used by a lot of the land-based naval attack squadrons. In fact, there are going to be some Nels that are going to be in on the sinking of the Prince of Wales and Repulse. So this is not an antiquated airframe by any stretch. And so yeah, here they come.
Yeah, 27 of them to be exact. Nine of them peel off in a separate formation. That's why Elrod said he saw two formations of V's. They've already done
Hmm.
this. Nine of them are going to go bomb Wilkes Island, while the remainder are going to focus on the airstrip for obvious reasons. I put on the ground, the civilians and the Marines thought the incoming aircraft were B-17s.
Oops.
Because, yeah, and it's again one of these funny moments. These guys are manning their anti-aircraft positions, but they're just kind of standing there staring at these aircraft coming in. And a gentleman named Frank Gross, who was a Marine, just asks aloud. He's in one of these 3-inch AAA batteries. He says, "What are those B-17s?" And one of his buddies says, "B-17s, my ass. Those are Japanese, you moron." And within seconds,
Right.
the bombs start falling, quite literally within seconds, and
Yeah.
it kind of hits everybody at the same time that, oh, we're in danger, and
Yeah.
people just start, like
Yeah.
rats when you overturn it, like a sinking ship. They're everywhere.
Yep. Unfortunately, that means that yeah, there are a lot of people that are basically right out in the open when these things coming down. Just kind of stunned, that this kind of thing does happen. I mean, there's a similar air raid that's going to happen in Rangoon in Burma fairly early on, where there were thousands of civilians just kind of out. Wow, look at all those planes; those are really pretty. And then you get
Yeah,
this realization, oh my God, the bombs are coming down. It's like yeah, it's a little late now in the day to be figuring that out. Um, so the 9 Nels that go after Wilkes Island, which is the tiniest of these three islands, do very little damage to Camp 1 and Camp 2 out there. They then strafe and after they bomb, they receive some ground fire from the Marines for their trouble, but that's about all that they do. But the main target, of course, is the airfield, and that's going to get the attention of 18 of these Nels, two 9-plane Chutai, and they just plaster it. The
yeah,
Pan Am facilities on the island are reduced to rubble. There's actually one of these Pan Am Clippers is in the lagoon, and that is stitched up pretty good by machine gun fire. And unfortunately, 10 of the Chamorro laborers are killed by that gunfire. Japanese bombs hit both fuel storage tanks as well as 655-gallon fuel drums that were stacked along the side of the airstrip. Oops.
yeah.
Um, so the fuel destruction obviously is going to be an issue for the air group that is there. The real problem is these 8 remaining Wildcats that are just sitting right parked on the tarmac. By the time that this group of Nels disappears, 7 of those 8 Wildcats are destroyed. And the remaining one is only good to be used from a parts perspective at this point. So, yeah, you've just lost 2/3 your air power because you didn't have a
Yeah,
replacement.
because you had no place to put them. Exactly.
Yep.
So the 4 fighters that were aloft did go down to pursue the Japanese Nels, but they don't make it there in time. By the time they get down to the area where they could possibly intercept them, the Nels are gone. This happens in seconds. I mean,
Yeah.
they bomb and they're history.
Yeah.
As the bombers come over the airfield, aside from destroying 7 of the 8, and technically eight of the 8 on the ground, really. 4 of VMF 211's fighter pilots that are on the ground run to their aircraft to go get in the air and do
Right.
their thing. Lieutenants Frank Holden and Henry Webb are killed as they're running towards their aircraft. One, it said later that they were strafed. Frankly, it doesn't matter. They're both
Right.
deceased. They never make it to their aircraft. 2 other guys do, however. Lieutenants George Grave and Lieutenant Conderman are either killed in their airplane or getting on their airplane. Um,
Hmm.
one of the aircraft, now I think it's Conderman, if I remember correctly, a bomb goes off literally right next to the bird, and it just shreds the bird and him as he's
Dread
getting
him.
in the airplane. Um,
Yeah.
those 4 pilots are killed outright. They are not wounded. They are dead. Ground crewmen who had nowhere to go hid
Yep.
under the aircraft or along the strip because they were quite literally caught out in the open.
Yep.
They're either killed by machine gun fire or bombs or both. In all, 55 ground personnel on or around the airstrip. Of the 55 that were on there, only 21 escaped harm. 23 were killed outright, while a further 11 were wounded in some fashion, and most of those guys perish later.
Yeah.
60% casualty rate an hour into the war.
This is kind of your little mini version of the Clark Field debacle in the Philippines at the beginning of the war there. Eh, Perhaps not as scandalous a set of circumstances, but yeah, we've lost 2/3 of our airplanes and 2/3 of our ground staff are dead at the end of this initial attack. It's a real shellacking.
It really
Um,
is.
yeah, they end up killing as well dozens of these civilian workers as they were eating in a mess hall at Camp 2. Strafing Japanese aircraft and bombs killed them as they're eating breakfast. So why didn't we let people know that there was, in fact, a war going on? We might have saved some of their lives. Uh, in about 7 minutes, Japanese bombs and bullets totally wrecked Pan Am's facilities. Bombing and strafing set fire to the hotel in which 5 Chamorro employees died, and also to a stockroom, fuel tanks, and many other buildings, and demolished the radio transmitter. 9 of Pan Am's 66-man staff lay dead. 2 of the Philippine Clippers crew were wounded as well. Yeah, it's a pretty bad attack.
It's a beating, and it is the worst beating that they take via air, but it just
Yeah,
pounds the air power, which is
yep,
Wake's only offensive punch that they have.
yep,
Um, Almost as soon as the nails depart, the guys start to pick up the pieces. The Pan Am Clipper, as you said a minute ago, was hit by machine gun fire, and a couple of the crewmen are dead, but the rest of the guys are like, "We're out.
we're out.
Goodbye."
Yeah,
They
the thing is
start.
flyable, and so they load the passengers on that thing, and they boogie 32 passengers and workers pile into that thing, and away they go back to Hawaii.
And they go to Honolulu, and that's where they make the first. No, I'm sorry. They go to Honolulu, and then they go to Frisco, and then when they get to San Francisco, that's where they make the first report of Wake's attack is actually in San Francisco by
Mm-hmm.
these people when they get off the Pan Am Clipper. Um, Several of the AAA batteries were damaged to some degree. A
Mm-hmm.
Marine by the name of Bright Godbold was in charge of Battery D. He had his crew repair the weapon, and then they had to move it, or they moved it manually. And
Yep,
that doesn't sound like it's that big of a deal, but that's a 3-inch anti-aircraft gun,
that's a heavy piece of
manhandled.
ordnance.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
solid steel, brother. There's no aluminum there.
yeah,
And they wind up moving this thing. It takes them all night long to
yep,
move this weapon. The
yep.
civilians do get in there and they do lend them a hand and they do help them move this thing.
The reasoning here is that we think that the Japanese will have spotted where those emplacements are, and next time they'll be coming around to put
Yep.
the remainder of those weapons out of commission. And so, if we can move our batteries around after every attack, it makes it that much more difficult for the Japanese to target those things and destroy them. It's a good thought. It's just, man, it's a real pain in the butt from a logistical standpoint to actually move these things around. So, yeah,
It's Godbold's idea to move the gun, and once that idea is made known to Devereaux, he's like, "Oh, that's a good idea. Everybody move your guns."
yeah,
So all of the guns, and then we're not talking from one end of the island to the other. We're talking, 50,
100
60
feet,
yards or
yeah,
yeah, or
whatever, yeah.
a couple
Just
hundred
don't
feet or
be where
something.
you was. Yeah,
Correct.
exactly.
But they do it every night. They do it
Right.
every blessed night. Um, One of the AAA guns, not the battery, the guns was unmanned because they didn't have enough people to man them. And Godbold took it upon himself, obviously with the approval of his senior officers, to train some of these civilians to operate this weapon.
Right. So we
And
now have a civilian gun crew on one of these AAA mounts.
yeah, yeah. And according to Godbold, who said it later, he said that they operated that weapon just as good as the Marines did because, they knew, as you were saying before, their lives are at stake here too.
It's amazing how quickly you can come up the learning curve when yeah, the fear of God is put into you.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. No kidding.
yeah,
No kidding. So the Wake Island is raided multiple times over the next several days. And like I put in the notes, a blind man could tell what they were doing.
sure. We're
They
softening up
started
this island
exactly, and
preparation
because
for
instead of hammering the airfield, they start hammering everything on the outside on the periph. So
hmm getting rid of the shore defenses. Yep.
yeah, the one thing we talked about, there's guys that were wounded in that first attack and they do perish later in the hospital is because the hospital is hit.
Yeah.
The hospital is hit heavily, and it was marked. It was marked per Red Cross standards with the big friggin' Red Cross on the roof, and the Japanese hit it and bomb it, and a lot of people are killed in there. There are two doctors, Navy doctors, excuse me, on site. There's two gentlemen named Doctors Khan and Doctor
And
Shank.
Shang.
Yeah,
hmm
and they went up pulling people out of the burning building, and then go establishing. They have to establish another triage center or
Yep.
something like that, for lack of a better term. And they do it in these magazines, don't they?
Yeah, exactly. Because the magazines are relatively well protected from this kind of stuff because obviously you want to have a fairly beefy building if you're going to be putting your ammunition in there. So they essentially ends up requisitioning two of these magazines and turning them into little mini field hospitals. So they've they're able to put two 21 bed wards into these two little magazines as a result.
Yeah. On one of these raids, the gentleman that we mentioned before first starts to put his name into legend, and that is Captain Henry T., or as they called him, Hammer and Hank Elrod. He's aloft in his Wildcat. He spots, this is on the 10th, he spots a flight of 22 Nels and attacks it alone by himself. Um, he dives in and out of the formation. He claims two Nels. There is one that is absolutely definite that does not return
For
home.
sure. Yeah,
The other one does return back to home. It was smoking pretty badly, but from everything I was able to find, it kind of was,
yeah.
a
Makes it
hanger.
back to the Martians.
Yeah,
Yep.
it makes it back, and then it's a hanger queen after that. It doesn't
Yeah.
go, pretty much. So technically, it is a second kill. But let's talk about the Japanese. So
Here we
now
go.
we talked about the Japanese aerial onslaught.
Hmm.
There's gonna be more that's gonna come. Let's riff on
Yeah.
these guys.
Yeah, so the landing force that is coming, spoiler alert, is commanded by a guy named Rear Admiral Kajioka Sadamichi. He is a graduate of the Etajima class of 1911. He is mostly a navigator, so this is not a, surface warfare officer really.
Nope.
He's a navigator and has been doing those sorts of commands all through his career. He commanded the light cruiser Nagara and later the light cruisers Kasuga and Kiso. And for the wake operation, he is in command of crew divs 18 and des divs 29 and 30. This is not the A team. This is arguably more like the D team in that you've got some of the oldest light cruisers in the Japanese inventory. You've got the Tatsuda, the Tenryu, and the
Mhm.
Yubari. And one of the things that I find so interesting about this is that all three of those ships, spoiler alert, are going to feature in the Battle of Savo Island at Guadalcanal in August of 1942. They're, these squadrons are the kinds of forces that you're going to use to garrison kind of backwater regions, and Rabaul is going to be that at the beginning of Guadalcanal. So these old cruisers are going to be down there too. They actually do have some fairly exciting combat moments in their career. But yes, these are the gentlemen that are going to be showing up to try to invade Wake Island. Likewise, the two destroyer divisions that are coming across are really old destroyers. These are Kamikaze and Motsuki class destroyers. So these are World War One vintage combatants. They are, the equivalent of our four Piper
Mhm.
destroyers in the U.S. Navy. They're rocking 4.7-inch guns in single mounts, open mounts. They are not power trained. They don't have any sort of what do I want to say, power operated, hoist machinery and that kind of
Right,
stuff. These
right.
are hand served mounts being fired over open iron sights. Again, this is very much not the A team. They are going to be bringing along 450 troops from the Second Maizuru Special Naval Landing Force. And it's funny because when you start looking at some of the articles on this, they will often refer to the SNLF as Japanese Marines,
Right.
and they ain't.
No.
The whole way that the Japanese Navy organized their landing troops, they viewed them as expedience, I guess I would say, that if we're given an assignment where we need to have a landing party to secure the defense of a location, we will put together these sort of ad hoc units, use them, land them, and in many cases disband them after they have been landed. Um, and so they are also formed on the basis of Japan's naval districts back in the home islands. And so the four main districts back there, you've got Kure, you've got Sasebo, you've got Maizuru, and then it's got to be Yokosuka would be the fourth, I would assume. Um, and so each one of those districts, by the time you get to the eve of World War II, has got two or three battalions worth of these landing troops. Um, they are equipped with army weapons because the Navy doesn't really want to invest anything in developing much in the way of specialized equipment, although later in the
Mhm.
war they will have amphibious tanks and that kind of stuff in very small quantities. But these guys are basically armed with infantry light weapons, grenade launchers, and that sort of thing. They have very little in the way of any sort of heavy artillery or heavy firepower. It really is a light infantry force armed with machine guns and rifles and grenade launchers. That's pretty much what they got. So anyway, Second Maizuru is coming along, and here's the interesting part: as you put in the notes, they're bringing along 450 guys, and yet their
Yes.
intel reports are telling them there's 1,000 Marines on this island and 600 civilians. So that that suggests a fair amount of confidence in the fighting ability of these troops, which I would suggest is highly unwarranted. But then again, if you look at the way the Japanese are running the entirety of this first phase offensives, they are in many cases putting their forces up against allied formations that are two or three times their size and just basically saying, yeah, but we're better than you. And in a lot of cases they are. I mean, this
Right.
is this is what happens in Malaya over and over again. It happens in Hong Kong. I hate to say it too. So, you know, is this arrogance on the part of the Japanese? Yeah. But in these early campaigns, they often get away with this sort of running things on a shoestring. So yeah, they're only bringing in 450 troops to this fight. There you
Yeah.
go.
I forget what is the ratio you want at least 2 to 1, if not three
Three to
to
one.
one.
Three to
Yeah.
one is what you
When
want
you
on the
when you're
water's edge.
landing and
Uh,
you ain't even close, you're
Not
not
even.
even you're not even
No, it's
close.
1 to 3 if your intel
Yeah.
estimates are right, and they're not right. Obviously, we
Right.
know that the Americans have only got, 300 some guys on this island, but nevertheless, you're in the best case, you're looking at 1 to 1. So
Yeah.
that ain't super, but
No, not at all.
yeah,
Not at all. And it's like I put in the notes, it had been suggested, it has been in books and even in the Marine Corps monograph talks about this, that, that it was thought by the Japanese that due to the airstrikes and they'd hit Wake one, two, three or four times. I forget now, I forget which now.
yeah,
These 3 or 4 times via air with heavy strikes
yeah,
that most of the facilities were destroyed, and they were to be 100% true,
yeah,
and that the Marines would just fold like a lawn chair, and that is not going to be the case as we're going to see. But I mean, as I
yeah,
put in the notes again, 450. I don't care how confident you are, 450 guys against what your intel's saying is 1,000 Marines.
yeah.
That's just
That gives you an
dumb.
indication of yeah, of how incredibly low they rated our combat power and our
Yeah,
morale in
yeah,
particular. That they thought that these airstrikes would, yeah, do in our morale and we would just give up.
yeah.
So yeah,
So let's get into this, and I want to. I'm sure the audience is going to want to hear what you got to say here. So for years and years and years and years and years, the capture of Wake Island was just seen as a land grab. Like, oh, hey, we're on this offensive, let's just take it. That's not really the case here, though, is it?
yeah. The Japanese throughout these early phase operations would suffer from uh, what I would call outpost itis, in that it became this sort of self-replicating logic that, well, if I've got a series of bases that I want to protect, then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab outposts around those bases to form a defensive cordon. But lo and behold, you capture these outposts, and now, oh, well, maybe they need outposts to protect them too. The
Mhm.
same logic is the reason for the Battle of Coral Sea, I would argue, in that when the Japanese grab Rabaul at the tip of New Britain, they instantly recognize this is a very important base, and therefore we need to have outposts around it to protect it. Gee, we're getting bombed by this place called Port Moresby. Let's go grab it. And I swear to God, if they had grabbed Port Moresby, they would have said, well, Port Moresby is getting
Darwin.
bombed by this, by Townsville in Australia. We should probably get an outpost to protect Port Moresby. It just, this military
Where does
never
it
had the
end?
ability.
Yeah.
Yeah, presumably that logic would replicate all the way to Kansas if it were given the opportunity. So, in any case, that's the reason that they're coming here to grab Wake. It is to grab an outpost that will be a bulwark to protect their main holdings in the Marshall Islands and potentially, of course, too, to project power towards the Hawaiian Islands if they ever decide to go there. So that's why they're coming here to grab Wake.
So Kagioka did not, as we said, he was massively overconfident.
Yep,
And it wasn't just him, it was the whole
the
Japanese
whole lot.
military. Yeah, the
Yep,
whole shooting match. They figured, or Kagioka specifically figured that he could take Wake in 2 days, and he was going to do it with landing
100,
150 guys on Wilkes and 300 on Peel. And that was
which is
his
the big island. Yeah,
thought. Yeah, that
that's
was his
his
thought.
oops. So it
Yeah,
goes.
yeah. So let's talk about the first landing attempt here.
Attempt
Attempt.
December 11th.
December the 11th, 1941. So the Marines and the civilian volunteers had been in their foxholes since the 10th because they'd come under air attack on the 10th. And Devereaux had kind of sniffed it out that, they're coming.
Yeah,
They're not just bombing us to expend ammunition. They're coming, and they're going to be coming sooner rather than later. So he
yep.
essentially kept everybody, including the volunteers, the civilians, in foxholes or defensive positions or whatever, almost 24 hours a day, because that was their safest spot to be during an air raid, number one. And number two, if the defecation hits the ventilation, that's where you need to be.
Yep.
So in the pre-dawn hours of December the 11th, the waiting, as I put in the notes, ended. Lookouts on Wilkes Island spotted something moving out to sea. Captain Wesley Platt, whom you're going to hear a lot about next week, was the strong point commander in the southeastern section of Wilkes. He looked through a pair of binoculars and stared at the sea for a long time, for minutes, because he's getting his gyranes are saying, "Hey, boss, there's something moving out there." So he's
Yeah.
just literally just standing there watching and waiting to see if something moves. He didn't see anything initially. And then as he continues to stare, he sees something move, whether it's a ship or a boat or whatever.
Hmm.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. He, according to witnesses, he puts his glasses down, just says, "Son of a bitch," under his breath, and immediately called Devereaux. And he says, when Devereaux picks up the horn, he says, "Sure looks like some ships out there, sir." Devereaux goes out from his HQ, gets on top of a bunker, and does the same thing. Just stands there with binoculars and just stares out to sea. And he said, he wrote later, he says, quote, "I studied the sea through the night glasses. If anything had come close to shore, it had moved out again. The sea seemed empty, but then I saw them." And he
Hmm.
says, as he takes the binoculars down, he just said, "Here they are."
Yep.
And he knew they were coming. He counted, and it's pretty accurate, considering you're looking at this about 3 o'clock in the morning. He counts some 13 ships out there, is what he
That's right on
sees.
the money. Yep.
Yeah, yeah,
Yep.
not bad, not bad.
Not bad. Yeah. Three cruisers and some destroyers.
Yeah,
So yeah, as soon as we get at least a little light at 0400, we put up um, what is left of our air power on the island. So all four
four.
of the F4Fs go up at that point. And now these Wildcats have got a 100-pound bomb under each of their wings. So they take off at 0515 and are now up in the air. The other thing that Devereaux has told his 5-inch gunners is that he wants them to hold fire until he tells them to go ahead and commence. And he is convinced that if the Japanese decide to stand off and bombard us from range, we're going to lose. And so
Yeah.
he wants to provoke a sense of complacency in the Japanese, draw them in if at all possible, get them really close to the island before he's going to give the order to his 5-inch guns, which are by far his most effective shore batteries, to go ahead and open fire. So we're just sitting here waiting for the Japanese to do their thing. Kajioka initially brings his ships into about 8,000 yards,
which is
and
freaking close, by the
that's
way.
already pretty close. That's only 4 miles away, a little five.
Yeah.
And the 5-inch gunners at this point are tracking them, and they're certainly, uh, you know, talking back to Devereaux, can we open up now? And
Right.
he's like, no, you can't. And sure enough, the Japanese fall for this. They're not taking any fire from this island, and that convinces them that, the American batteries have maybe already been knocked out or whatever. And so Kajioka brings Yubari, which is the biggest of these light cruisers, in to about between 4 and 5,000 yards, and finally starts opening fire on Wake from those warships.
Yeah. They start doing these, and I'll post a map that was drawn by the
Yeah,
Marines after the war. They start doing these like lazy,
S
uh,
turn kind of things.
yeah, the
Yeah,
really, really wide S turns, and then they're just shooting up the shore. But of course, every turn they make, they're coming a little bit closer, and they're coming a
yeah.
little bit closer, and a little bit closer. Um, the
And
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, just in terms of Japanese landing doctrine, I'm intrigued by this because most of what I know about that, it comes from Alan Millett, who,
Mhm.
has written on that topic fairly extensively. And the Japanese preferred to land at night, if at all possible, and against undefended beachheads. But they know that this one may well be defended. It seems, though, that they are lining up here for a daylight landing, that they are going to bombard Wake for a number of hours, soften it up, and then, go ahead and put their SNLF into their Daihatsu barges and put them up on the beach, I presume, during the day. I haven't been able to find any source material
It
that,
had to have been
yeah,
because Yubari opens fire at 0522.
right. So we're going to do this for the morning, and we're probably going to go in sometime before lunchtime, would be my, that's my off the cuff.
One would imagine so, yes.
Mhm.
Because I mean, I don't know what the sunrise is. We could
And this
figure
is
it
one of
out,
those areas where
but
it's just like, you know, um, how come we haven't got a translation of Senshi Sosho that I can go and look this up? I may point my phone at it one of these days and see. Anyway, but yeah, the bottom line is that these three Japanese cruisers are now opening up on Wake, and they are, you know, their shell fire is hit and miss, as you put in in the notes. Some of the rounds land within the camp areas. They hit some of our diesel storage tanks, and
yeah,
that makes a very large kaboom. But the majority of these shells overshoot and land in the lagoon, which makes perfect sense because, again, they're in not necessarily calm seas. These ships do not have modern fire control, really. So these guys, the gunners on these things, are firing pretty much over open sights. Although the light cruisers have got fire control equipment, the destroyers don't have much in the way of that. But in any case, the accuracy of the gunnery from these ships is not terribly good.
yeah. So this is straight out of the Marine Corps monograph. It says, quote, nearing the western tip of Wake, 20 minutes later, Kagioka's flagship, the Yubari, closed to within 6,500 yards, scouring the beach with her 5.5-inch fire. At 06, the light cruiser reversed course yet again. Again, I'll show the map, and
Mm-hmm.
closed the range still further, unquote. So as she keeps getting closer, about 5,000 yards, and you're 100% right, is that these 5-inch gunners are
Just
itching. Yeah,
spittle running
they
down the
are
chin. Come on.
itching to open fire.
Yep.
And Devereaux wrote later, after the war, that his phone was ringing off the hook. And he's like, "Can we go? Can we shoot? Can we shoot? Can we shoot?" And
Yeah.
every time he'd just simply say, "Not yet, not yet,"
Right.
because he wanted to draw him in, kind of like the spider does to the fly. Draw him
Yeah.
in a little bit closer, a little bit closer. By 0610, Yabari was 4,500 yards from Battery A on Peacock Point, with the
Yep.
destroyer Hayate, the same distance-ish from Battery L on Wilkes. At that moment,
Yeah. So these
Devereaux
ships are,
gives the command to open fire.
yeah, these ships are now less than 3 miles offshore. That is
And
really
that's
close shooting. So
easy
yeah.
range for a 5-inch gun.
Yes, sir.
Easy range. So almost in unison, because these guys had been like coiled springs.
Yeah.
Boom! Everybody
Yeah.
opens fire at the same damn time. Peacock points 5-inch gun. was on the high ground, if you will, on a flat island. It
Probably
sent the
all of 6 feet above sea level. Yeah, right.
at
Yeah,
best, it sent the first projectile well beyond the target. These guys adjust range very, very quickly. These are pretty well trained coastal, you know,
yeah,
Marines are they know what the hell they're doing. Um, they immediately seem to score hits on Yubari, and we can talk about this in a second.
yeah,
Yubari is as we said, is Kagioka's flagship. The Marines claim, and still claim to this day, that they hit Yubari. Um, Kagioka's flagship returns counter battery fire to the Marines on there, and they land a couple of shells in Battery B's vicinity. They are, as you said before, the fire is woefully inaccurate at
yep,
this point. Um, Yubari is still sailing, and she's being straddled by the 5-inch batteries. And again, they claim they hit it, but John, we talked about this.
yeah.
Her tabular record of movement says that she wasn't hit, yet
That's
crewmen that
correct.
were on it say that she was. So this
Sources
goes
are
back to what we were
conflicting.
talking about earlier, the confusion.
Yeah, yeah. We don't know. The bottom line is, though, that she does end up laying down a smoke screen because she
Yes.
realizes relatively quickly that she's in a place where she ought not to be. So, yeah, I would like more clarification of that as well, and that's another area that Senshi Sosho might be able to help us out. But in any case, yeah, she lays a smoke screen and begins to get out of Dodge.
As I put in the notes, that smoke screen is probably
What the
what the
Marines are
Marine.
seeing,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
And, well-trained crew or not, there should have been visible evidence.
mhm,
And at this range, you would have expected that there would have been hits. So it's a little disappointing that there was not something more tangible that would have, like killing Kajioka on the bridge. That was
right.
perfectly within the realm of expectation. But in any case, yeah, so it goes.
Oh, that
Meanwhile,
confirmation's coming though.
yeah, out at Battery L, the rangefinder had been damaged during one of the air raids, and they didn't have it repaired at this point. But they order uh, the battery to use Kentucky windage and lob a
Mhm.
few shells and then walk them in. And so Hayate, which is one of these older destroyers, turned broadside to the beach right in front of Battery L, and they open up on her. First shot is over, and the gunner, John McAllister, known as Johnny Mac, that's a great nickname, dialed the
Yeah, it
next
is.
round down. Shot was under. Platt, who was observing through the binoculars, set it in the open and adjusted the fire a bit up, and the next shot is right on the money.
Yeah,
Slams into her aft portions, just a little bit aft of the midships, and Platt at that point yells, "You're in, Johnny Mac. You're in. Let her have another one," and they do.
mhm.
So bottom line is
She.
that, yeah,
Oh, go ahead.
Hayate
Go ahead.
just goes kaboom. They hit her
Yeah,
in her magazine, and she goes right up in a massive explosion that breaks the ship in two, and she sinks within 2 minutes and takes her entire crew down with her.
yeah. Was it like 150 guys, 156 guys?
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yep.
that's just instantaneous.
Boom,
So
gone.
when this happens, naturally, the 17, 18-year-old boys start going berserk.
Bananas. Yeah.
Yeah, start going absolute berserk. One of Battery L's older salts yelled, quote, "Knock it off, you jackasses. What do you think this is? A ball game. Get back to the damn guns."
Yep.
Hey,
Yep.
you
And
got to cut
start.
through the crap to get to the
Yeah,
business.
absolutely. We're still in a
So,
war here. So they end up then taking some of Hayate's sister ships, Oite and Mochizuki, under fire and do manage to get some hits on them. Oite suffers 14 wounded, and Mochizuki sustains an undetermined number of casualties. So, yeah, and their return fire is not very effective. Again, older ships, bad fire control, open mouths, operating under local control. Yeah, their gunnery is just garbage. So,
yeah. Battery L is not the only one that's going to see action here, too. Battery B, under First Lieutenant Kessler, is at the tip of Peel Island. It's dueling with the destroyers. Is it Yayoi? Yayoi?
Yayoi, Mutsuki, and Kisaragi.
So three.
Yeah.
dueling with three Japanese destroyers as well as the Tenryu and the Tatsuta.
Yeah.
They draw heavy counter battery fire for
Yeah.
obvious reasons from all those ships. Um, it actually disables this 5-inch gun that is shooting there at Battery B. The crew gets the hell out of there, goes to another weapon, um, and starts firing back at these people. Kessler's remaining guns hit on Yoyoi's stern, which killed one man, wounded 17 others, and started a fire.
Yeah.
His gunners then shifted their attention to the next destroyer, which is going to be Mutsuki. At this point, the enemy's counterfire severed communications, as we talked about earlier. That's going to happen when you got open phone lines laying on the sand between
Yeah.
Kessler's command post and the gun. But Battery B, the muzzle blast temporarily disabling the rangefinder, continued to fire in local control. So these guys are literally just looking down the bore
Yep.
and pumping rounds at the targets as fast as they can put them in the breach.
Yep.
Kajioka takes an absolute beating here before he even gets a man on shore.
Yep.
And he's
Yeah.
like, I'm out,
I'm out. Yeah. Not
which
this
is
isn't.
unusual, right? I mean,
Yeah. I mean, typically the Japanese didn't turn around and run like this, but I think there's an old phrase that a ship's a fool to fight a fort, and he recognizes that this is a thornier target than he had anticipated. I don't know if he knows that he's lost Hayate at this point, because again, he has separate formations that are attacking each of these batteries. But it's pretty clear that, yeah, he's taken a lot more fire than he had really counted on. And it ain't over yet, because at this
no.
point, the Marine air cover shows up and makes their debut in the fighter bomber role.
Yeah, oh my God. And the beating that these people put on the Japanese, it's
Yeah,
insane. So
yeah.
it's Elrod is airborne, as is Major Putnam and Lieutenants Theron and I'm sorry, Captain Theron and Freuler. Again,
Hmm.
forgive me if I'm butchering the gentleman's last name. They begin to make just repeated strafing runs on the Japanese as they're retreating. They do drop their 100-pound bombs. The Japanese put up AAA, which we've poo-pooed Japanese naval AAA in the past, but this is fairly accurate. Granted, they're only shooting at four American fighter aircraft, but
Yeah, and there's
it's
not a lot of 25s, 25 millimeter mounts on these ships. Again, these are very old.
yeah,
Yeah, I doubt that these things had so much as a pair of 25 millimeters on any one of them. I should go and look that up. So I
well,
have failed in my role of IGN
what,
nerd. But yeah, it was
whatever it
whatever
is, it
they
hurts
had.
them. Yeah,
Yeah, it was sufficiently vigorous to make life for Elrod and his three companions relatively exciting. Um, Nevertheless, they make repeated runs over these Japanese ships, and Kajioka is almost killed when one of
yes,
the F4Fs strafes the bridge of Yubari. And one of the officers on Yubari writes afterwards that they were, quote, hounded out to sea by fanatical American fighters who strafed us relentlessly and dropped bombs with impunity.
yeah,
Which, once again, God bless, if we had just had more in the way of air power here, they never would have taken this place from us. But oh well.
not a
Anyway,
chance, not a
yep.
chance. So these guys do this, these four fighter pilots, and actually there's a couple other guys that wind up jumping in the cockpit to give somebody a breather. Elrod makes the attacks all morning long. It goes on
Hmm.
for an hour, actually, a little bit over an hour.
Yep.
They hit a bunch of other ships. Tenryu comes under attack from Putnam, Theron, and Freuler. Um, they strafe her up forward, hit near her number one torpedo tube mount, wounding five guys and disabling three torpedoes. That could have been really
That
bad.
could have been really bad. Yeah. Unless the warheads were not in the torpedoes. I mean, well, yeah, it's hard to say. I'm
Yeah.
in a long discussion actually with Randy Stone,
Hmm.
talking about just we don't know a lot about Japanese torpedo arming practice, and I'll share some of the details with you later on. But turns out these older ships are not armed with Type 93s, but these big oxygen driven torpedoes are really cantankerous, dangerous beasties, and yeah, they don't typically probably put the triggers in these for these things, unless they think they're going to get
Yeah,
into a
fixing to
surface fight,
launch them.
which obviously they don't think they're going to be. So, but no, the fact that they've taken fire around one of these torpedo mounts, yeah, if they hit the warhead on that thing, that could be very, very bad news for one of these ships, and they get away scot-free, except for the
Yeah.
final attack from our man Hammer and Hank.
This guy was just such a badass. So he keeps just coming in and coming in and coming in. He drops a bomb, or at least that's what it says. It could have been both, but who knows? He drops a bomb, then it actually hits the destroyer Kisarage.
Mm-hmm.
It hit amidships, and it starts. It's a 100 pounder, so it's not, unless it's like
But
super lucky, it's not going to hit the magazines, and maybe, but I doubt it. But what it does do is it starts an internal fire in this old DD, and it actually winds up bringing her to a halt.
yes,
She is dead in the water, and she just sitting there burning. Elrod peels away, goes back home, reloads, rearms, gets ready to go again. And he does take off, but he doesn't get back to the area around Kisarage because there is no area around Kisarage because at 0737 Putnam, Major Putnam, who's now making a run on the disabled destroyer, comes
which is
up some
30 miles. Yeah,
30 miles away. All of a sudden,
boom.
up she goes.
Yeah,
156 of her crew go down.
yep. So yeah, the Japanese have now lost two of these old destroyers in the course of this abortive landing attempt. So all totaled, the Marine aviators dropped 20 100-pound bombs. So yeah, they were flying multiple sorties and expended 20,000 rounds of 50 cal in their attacks over a period of about an hour. Every aircraft was hit at least once, with Elrod's bird being shot up really, really badly to the point of complete destruction because it ruptures an oil line, which is going to cause the engine to freeze up. So he puts that bird down in a dead stick landing and then hops out of the plane. What a dude. Yeah.
Yeah.
And at that point, is greeted by Devereaux. Uh, and all Elrod could say was, I'm sorry as hell about the plane. Just the king of understatement. Yeah.
Yeah. Big time.
Yep.
By the end of the morning, two
Yeah. We're down to
F4Fs are
two. Yeah.
available to fly. And even then, they're only because every one of them gets, we talked about the AA, every one of them gets hit by Japanese anti-aircraft fire and
Yeah.
to some degree. And they're only able to fly with scavenged parts from the other, you know, destroyed
Yeah.
aircraft. So the tally for the 11th of December is two ships sunk by gunfire or aircraft,
Yep.
one of each, obviously. Seven
Yep.
others have been damaged to some various degree. There's another air raid that follows this event, and two Nells are shot down in that air raid. And this is
Mm-hmm.
about 2 hours after Kajioka departs.
Yeah.
Um, and one would think that Devereaux is going to be ecstatic over this defense, and he is. Obviously, he's happy,
Very pleased.
but he's not stupid. He knows that they're going to come back, and they're
Yeah,
going to
they
come
are.
back, and it's not going to be easy.
Yeah. Yeah. At this point, Teeters has now cobbled together about 450 civilians who are more than willing to fight if and when the Japanese came back. And he goes and tells Devereaux, I've got the equivalent of a couple of companies worth of civvies at this point who are willing to, join the ranks, if you will. Um, he and Devereaux discuss their disposition and come to the plan that basically the civilians are going to stand watches, deliver food, and build shelters for the inevitable return clash that they know is going to be coming.
Yeah.
So,
He, I love this quote here. He goes back to his HQ, and his corporal, who was his runner, just smiles at him and says, it's been quite a day, hasn't it, Major?" And Devereaux just replies, says, "Indeed it has. Indeed it has." So this last quote again comes from the Japanese monograph, from the Marine Corps monograph, and it goes like this, quote, "The Japanese force, meanwhile, humbled by sizable casualties," and they were,
mhm.
withdrew to the Marshalls, having requested aircraft carrier reinforcement. Hundreds of miles away at Pearl Harbor, elements of the 4th Marine Defense Battalion received orders to begin preparing for an operation, the destination of which was closely held. The Marines of the battalion fervently desired to assist their comrades on Wake Island, and many of them probably concluded, "We're headed for Wake."
Yes. And now it is shaping up for round two.
Hmm. And round two, you know, I think probably anybody who's watched this knows the story of Elrod and sinking the Japanese destroyer and Battery L popping Hayate. And the common image of Wake Island is the Japanese swarming ashore and killing all the Marines and capturing a bunch of them and the civilians and everything else. And it's a cakewalk. Well, let me tell you, brother,
Mm-mm,
it ain't.
it ain't.
It
Yeah.
is not at
And once
all.
again, yeah, that lost year worth of time looms large in the the narrative arc of the coming attack. So
Yeah, and
yeah,
there's why we broke this up because there's so much to talk about because there's relief efforts that the
right.
U.S. Navy is planning
Yeah,
and quite frankly executing when
yes.
the this everything goes south. So,
Yeah.
and we'll
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 talk
talk
about that
about that
next
next.
time.
Yeah. All right, man.
Cool.
You good?
Yeah, I'm
All right.
good.
All right, let's wrap this sucker. So, with that,
All
we want
right.
to thank you very much for listening in on this conversation. Please send us a rating and review. We do appreciate it. If you have a comment, send us an email at unauthorizedpacificpodcast@gmail.com, and I'll do my best to reply to you. I've caught up, but I have not looked at any of the questions that you guys have been sending in. As we're recording this, the Q&A questions are still flowing in. Of course, this hasn't
We got a
aired
lot.
yet.
Got some good ones.
I don't know if they're any good. I haven't looked at them. I promised
Right.
Sean I wouldn't read them.
Yeah.
But just suffice to say, there's more than enough for a couple of shows. I'll just say
Okay.
that.
More than
There's
enough
a
for a
load
couple
of them.
of cocktails. That's what I like to hear.
There's a
So
load of them.
cool.
So thank you guys very much for sending those in. So
Yeah.
um, just want to say again, thank you very much for listening or watching. My name is Seth Paradin. John, my buddy, thanks for being here as always.
Yep. I'm the scintillating John Partial, and we will see you again next week.
Hello, and welcome to episode 526 of the Unauthorized History of the Pacific War podcast. My name is Seth Paradin, historian and deputy director of the Mississippi Armed Forces Museum. And with me, as always, is my co host, historian and author, John Partial. I got it right this time. I didn't screw it up. How are you, John?
I'm really good actually. I just about 10 minutes ago got comps for the cover design for my 1942 book, which is really cool, and it makes you feel like, my God, this thing is actually going to be
Close.
real. Yeah, it's becoming a real thing. So yeah, that's pretty sweet. Anyway,
That's all. Awesome.
yeah,
Awesome. Getting
getting
close to the
close.
finish line. Yeah.
Hmm.
All right. So we're going to pick up this week where we left off last week. It's not really a cliffhanger because, everybody knows
We
what
all know how it
happens.
comes out. Yeah, right.
Yeah. But
Yeah,
the details, the devil
right.
is in the details, as they say. So, war came to the Americans on Wake Island early on December 8th, 1941. Japanese air raid that morning wiped out 8 of the 12 F-4F Wildcats on the ground and killed or wounded 60% of VMF 211's manpower. 1st Marine Defense Battalion fared somewhat better in terms of casualties, as did the civilians ashore, but their time too would come. Weathering days of successive air raids made Marine Major James Devereaux fully aware that a Japanese amphibious landing and operation to capture the American outpost would come all too soon. How soon he did not know, however. Until it came, all he and his Marines could do was wait and hope. Back in Pearl Harbor, steps were being taken to make the Marines' hope a reality. Relief efforts were being put into action involving reinforcement, an effort that would employ nearly everything in the Pacific Fleet's very depleted arsenal of ships. Back in the States, news of the Marines' defense against the seemingly unstoppable Japanese war machine registered on every newspaper in the country. Every American, young or old, man or woman, kept themselves pinned to the radios and newspapers as the heroic stand of the beleaguered Marines against the Japanese juggernaut played out in the latter days of December 41. On Wilkes, Peel, and Wake proper, the Marines, with the more than willing assistance of now over 400 civilian volunteers, dug in, prepared machine gun positions, and readied defenses for the expected Japanese invasion should it indeed come. And the marshals, Japanese Rear Admiral Kajioka, was licking his wounds and preparing another attack. He indeed would be back, and he wouldn't make the same mistakes twice. The Japanese would hit Wake, he planned, with an overwhelming force and would crush the Americans ashore with ease. Or would they? Dun, dun, dun. So we can talk about Japanese amphibious doctrine when we get to that point
Yeah,
because it's pretty interesting in the way they do things and how
and
the
it,
sausage is made. We had the conversation somewhat with John McManus yesterday about Japanese amphibious doctrine. So it's
yes,
it's a
sir.
it's a
Yeah, and
thing.
Yeah, and it pertains obviously to other actions that are going to be happening places like Corregidor a little
Mhm.
later on in 1942. So, yeah, absolutely. We got a
So,
problem. Yeah, I mean the Americans are in the weeds here at this point and recognize that they are completely cut off.
yes.
Uh, Meanwhile, of course, back on the home front, there's a lot of fervent hope that maybe somehow this beleaguered garrison can hold out and that we can reinforce them sufficiently. But yeah, given the fact that Butai is kind of running rampant around the Pacific at this point in time, that's going to make things kind of difficult.
Yeah, and I pulled some headlines and things like that from
Yeah,
the American newspapers and magazines and whatnot. And I mean, you got to remember this is December 11th. This is four
right.
days, 4 days after the attack on Pearl Harbor, when you get your back broken, and then here's a little bit of a brace, if you will, to help stand up. So the defense, the successful defense was, as I put in there, was exactly what the doctor ordered in terms of the American morale on the home front, because it gave the Americans some sort of hope that we could go toe to toe with these people who are seemingly running all over the Pacific and Asia, unstopped. Well, we
Yeah.
stopped them right here. So it was a big deal all the way up to the president of the United States,
Yes.
who made mention multiple times about the defense of Wake Island, including one he said, quote, "So as far as we know, and this is important, Wake Island is holding out. They have done a magnificent job. We're all very proud of that small group of Marines who are holding the island." I think the key phrase there is "so far as
Far
we
as we
know."
know.
Yeah, because they
Yeah.
didn't.
Right. Yeah. Meanwhile, you've got newspaper headlines that are screaming things like Wake still under the American flag. The Washington Post called Wake epic in American history, one of those gallant stands that stirred the soul. Newsweek declares out in the middle of the Pacific on tiny Wake Island, a Marine Corps garrison gave the Japanese the surprise of their lives. Fair enough. All America is watching to see what the next move of the heroic Leathernecks will be.
Yeah, it dominated everything. And I mean,
Yeah.
insofar as even, after we know what happens, Hollywood made a movie entitled Wake Island that was, I want to say, it came out in 43 or
Yeah.
44.
Yeah.
So it was definitely a big thing, and they compared it a lot to the Revolutionary War, which
Mm-hmm.
I found to be kind of interesting, is that, the Marine stands, this small band of Marines on this little bitty atoll, is standing up against the imperial monster,
Right.
if you will, of Japan. Same thing as they were doing in, 1770s. And
Yeah.
it was, as I put in the notes, the mood in the United States was festive, but on Wake Island, it was not
Not,
not
not
so
even,
festive, not even
yeah,
close.
not even remotely. Yeah, and I'm just trying to think of, all the other litany of bad news that is coming in by December 11th. The Americans know at this point that the Prince of Wales and Repulse have been sunk off of Malaya. The Japanese have landed successfully in Malaya and are driving down that peninsula. The Battle of Jitra is going to happen very soon now, which is going to be a disaster for the British. American air power has been badly hurt in the Philippines, of course, and around this time too, I believe it's on the 10th that Cavite is heavily bombed by the Japanese, and that we lose all of our torpedoes there for our for the submarine force that's based in Manila. So yeah, things are really bad at this point. Hong Kong has been attacked as well. The Canadians have lost the gin drinker line by now, I believe, and are falling back to the city. So yeah, it's the beginning of a multi-month dumpster fire. Guam has already been captured.
Yeah.
And yeah, so Wake is like one of the few sort of seemingly bright notes in this whole assemblage of disaster. But yeah, meanwhile, back on Wake itself, Devereaux and his men are facing up to a rather grimmer situation. One of
Very, very much so.
Yeah, yeah. They got a lot of bodies at this point that have been stored in a refrigerated area for a number of days at this point, And even though the successful defense of the island on the 11th, when
Yeah.
they, shoo the Japanese Navy away and sink two of these old destroyers in the process, we actually didn't lose any men during that defense,
Which is astonishing, frankly.
which really is kind of astonishing when you think about it. But the bombing attacks up until that point have killed a number of people. And so by this time, Cunningham has ordered the dead to be buried for the fear of disease spreading. And so on the night of December 11th, they take one of Dan Teeter's steam shovels and they dig a trench in the sand about 100 yards from the eastern edge of the airfield. And they inter 80 military and civilian personnel in that makeshift grave and cover them over as quickly as possible, with the ceremony conducted by the civilian preacher John O'Neill.
And the crowd was sparse at the ceremony because people were in their positions. They were expecting an attack anytime soon. And we talked about it last week. They learned the lesson very hard. Cunningham did, specifically by not telling people that there was a war on and all these civilians got hurt and
Yeah,
killed in the Japanese bombing raid. Well, that no longer is the case. It's quite evident that there's a war on, number one. And number two, the civilians, for the most part, are taking cover where they can. And
yeah,
one of the terribly tragic things is that two of the people that were on Wake Island were a father and son team.
yeah,
And the son and I don't have the name, the son went to Wake to work with his dad because of the high wages that were being paid to civilian contractors. And the son is one of the young men that are killed in the bombing raid. And the father buries his son, who
yeah,
he tried to convince his son. It was like, you don't need to come out here. But the son's like, hey, I need the money. And
yeah,
it's terribly tragic. And there's going to be more of
yeah,
that. Yeah.
yeah. You're not going to get over that. Yep.
Yeah, not at all. So, despite being way out in the middle of nowhere, Wake can receive and does consistently receive radio from San Francisco, California,
Hmm.
and it's picking up, whatever the radio shows are of the day, and it's picking up radio frequencies constantly from San Francisco. Um, the Marines here now learn that they've been dubbed the Alamo of the Pacific, which, as I put in the notes, some of the guys are like, cool, we're the Alamo of the Pacific. And then the other guys are like, you do know what
Yeah.
happened to the defenders of the Alamo, right? So,
that, that story didn't turn out real well. So,
yeah,
yeah,
it's not a good
exactly.
harbinger of things to come, my friend.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Go on back. Yeah,
There, there's another episode, the gallows humor of condemned men as it is. Kay Kaiser was a band leader of the day, pretty famous band leader of the day. And on his weekly radio show, he dedicated a song. I don't know what the damn song was, to the men of Wake Island, to the defenders of Wake Island. And the guys heard this, like they could hear it
yep,
on the radios, there on Wake Island. And one of the Marines, a guy named Max Dana, told Captain Platt, and we're going to hear a lot about Wesley Platt today. He said, "Hey, Kay Kaiser dedicated a song in our honor," and Platt was this deadpan humor guy from South Carolina with a slow, deep Southern drawl that I can't even, imitate. And he said, "What did he play? Taps?" But goodness gracious. Hey, so
yep,
let's talk about these messages that are going back and forth, because there's a famous message that,
yes,
supposedly was sent that was actually never sent. So one of the famous messages and one of the myths that's about Wake Islander is the message that we're going to get to here in a second, that they needed more Japanese. So
right,
Cunningham is keeping an open line with Pearl Harbor, requesting literally everything under the sun because he knows he needs
sure,
everything yet. But let's
yep.
talk about this whole message flurry back and forth.
Yeah, the problem here is sort of a harbinger of the same kind of messaging that's going to trip Bill Halsey's trigger later on in the Battle of Leyte Gulf, in that you've got radio message men who are adding what you call padding to the front
Mhm.
and the rear end of these messages that are going back and forth to make it more difficult for the Japanese to try to decipher them if they've actually broken into the code system at all. And so on the morning of the 11th at 0845, this message goes out that, quote, send us, stop. Now is the time for all good men to come to the aid of their party, Cunningham, more Japs. And, by hook or by crook, somehow this padding gets rearranged. And when it's received then in Pearl Harbor, the message is translated to just be send us more Japs, which
Hmm.
is actually absolutely the last thing that Devereaux needed. And when and he never said those words,
Right.
Cunningham never, likewise, never said those words, but it becomes this sort of instant urban fable, if you will, that the Marines are all snorting and fire breathing, having beaten off this attack on the 11th, and here they are heroically saying, "Send us more Japs." And actually, when Devereaux specifically hears this message broadcast across the country via radio, he is appalled because that is absolutely the last thing that he needs at this point.
Yeah. And the thing, and they attributed that attributed it. No, I'll try it again. Attributed the message to Devereaux.
Right.
And the key thing is that he never sent any messages to Pearl Harbor whatsoever because he
Yeah.
wasn't the island commander. It was Cunningham.
Cunningham's.
Cunningham was the one that sent everything back and forth.
Yeah.
And he dang sure didn't say anything like that. And exactly to your point, Devereaux, when he hears this, he's like, "Hey, I never said that." And
Yeah.
B, no, we don't need any more. We got plenty on
Plenty.
our
Yeah.
own. And there's cartoons. There's like political cartoons and patriotic cartoons, I guess is a more appropriate term of these, big muscle-bound Marine with the pie pan helmet and the torn up sleeves and everything, standing there with a bubble or a thought bubble saying, send us more Japs and all this other stuff. And it was a real thing, but
That was a
yeah,
thing.
they
Yeah.
did not they did not need that at all.
No.
So let's talk about the relief effort. And this was
Yeah.
a thing. This was a definitely a real thing. Husband Kimmel at this point is still
Yep.
in command of the Pacific Fleet, even though he is probably keenly aware that he's going to be relieved at any moment.
Yep.
Um, he decides, and we talked about this last week, is that, he wanted Wake to be kind of dangled as a piece of bait to bring the Japanese fleet out, so the American fleet could engage them in a
Potentially fight
battle. And
a fleet
right,
action there. Right.
right,
Yeah. That was the pre-war plan. The post-war plan, of course, is looking a little bit different at this point, considering your battle line is now lying on the mud or worse. But nevertheless, he is going to try to get some additional reinforcements out to that island, and also, if possible, pull the civilians
yes,
off of the atoll as well. And to that end, they're going to use the seaplane tender Tangier. They're going to load that puppy up with as much in the way of supplies and manpower as they can, and they're going to bring it out there. And then they do the calculations to figure out that if the civilians basically bring nothing with them, nothing more than a toothbrush, they
mhm,
should be able to pull all of the civilians off and cram them onto Tangier and get them back to Hawaii. So Saratoga is going to be the carrier that's going to be covering this expedition. And so to that end, they're pulling together this task force, and then on December 12th, they load up 200 Marines of the 4th Defense Battalion onto the Tangier, and they unload her avgas in order to make room for more supplies. She's going to have 9,000 rounds of 5-inch ammunition, 12,000 rounds of 3-inch, 3 million rounds of belted 30 cal, and crates of hand grenades, barbed wire mines, 1911s, and parts for Wake's damaged shore batteries and AA guns. So if they could have gotten this in here, the eye opener for me is uh, 3 million rounds worth of 30 cal. That's what you need, Jack. There's a lot more infantry firepower out there. Would have been nice to have some mortars too. Frankly, they don't have any sort of indirect.
no,
Um,
not a lick, not a lick.
yeah,
And the fact that they're bringing that much stuff, I mean, that's a
yep,
lot. 9,000 rounds of 5-inch ammunition,
yep,
12,000 of three, and then the 3 million 30 cal. and one would assume that there's 50 in there too, but that's all I could find. But
Yeah,
regardless of this, they're not planning on leaving anytime soon.
right.
Like you said, they want to get the civvies out,
Yep.
and rightfully so. But they're not planning to leave that island. The Marines are going to hold that island. At least that's the plan, and they're going to
Although,
sit tight.
one of the things I note though is they're only bringing in 200 additional Marines,
Hmm.
and if you talk about taking all those civilians out, you are markedly decreasing the manpower that is on that island. Granted that the civilians are not combatants, but they are the manpower that you are using to improve your fortifications, clean up damage to installations that are being inflicted by the near daily bombing raids that are now coming over.
Yes.
So, to me, 200 Marines, that's not a huge additional commitment. I want a battalion. That's what I want to see. I want to, but they don't have.
Yeah, and that's the key is
Yeah,
that they got to do this and they got to do this like right now, and or Kimmel does. He wants to do this right now, and he can only. We've said it 100 times. You can only use what you got on
yeah,
hand, and that's all that's there at that moment because this
yeah,
is the 12th, 5 days after Pearl Harbor. First Marine Division
right.
is not a thing,
Yep.
and that's it. That's all there
And
is
you're
right
you're
there.
certainly not going to pull any army guys off
No,
of Oahu at this point because the threat of invasion of that place, in the pantheon of disposability, Oahu is like number one with a bullet of we cannot lose this. It's
right.
right up there with, the Panama Canal. So we're not going to be, deteriorating or degrading the defenses on Oahu in order to try to, relieve this garrison that's out in the middle
Yeah.
of nowhere at Wake.
Sending a 24th ID out there was never in the plans.
No.
It was
Yeah.
never gonna happen. Another element of defense or offense, however you want to look at it, was also going to be VMF 221,
Mm-hmm.
VMF 221. They're going to be aboard Saratoga, and they are aboard Saratoga with their F2A Brewster Buffaloes because that's
You
all they
see.
had. That's
Yep.
all they had. They were going to do similar to what 211 did is, when they get off a certain amount of distance, they're going to launch the Brewsters out there and they're going to land and they're going to, I wouldn't even say reinforce 211 because 211 has almost ceased to exist by this point. They're going to
Yep.
take their place
Yep.
and you're going to have more fighters on wake. Brewsters or not, at least they can fly. So,
Yep.
I mean, but all this symbolizes to me that Kimmel was like, he's dead set on we're going to hold this sucker at least for a while
Yeah.
to draw out the Japanese fleet so we can engage them because it's not just Saratoga that's part of these plans, it's also Lexington and Enterprise too.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so he's using those two carriers to try to stir up trouble in other
Yes.
locales, so that hopefully then Sarah and Tangier, which is old and slow, are going to have the wiggle room that they need to actually get into Wake and out of Wake, because of course it's going to take to Tangier the better part of 2 days to
Yeah.
offload all this stuff and then onload the civilians and then get the heck out of Dodge. So while Saratoga and Tangier are doing their thing, Task Force 11 under Vice Admiral Wilson Brown, which is Lexington, is going to be leaving Pearl Harbor and is going to go to Jalowit and raid in the Marshalls. Brown will hit Jalowit and then try to hightail it back to Pearl. Meanwhile, the Big E under Halsey is going to be out at sea acting as a potential reinforcement should the Japanese arrive to do battle. But Fletcher is now under orders in Saratoga to arrive off of Wake by 23 December and get Tangier to the atoll by Christmas Eve, and then hopefully load up and go and be out of there by 26 December.
Yeah. The Tangier, I looked it up right before we started this. Tangier could do 18 knots,
Yeah,
like downhill. She could do 18 knots, and then which is not
that's okay.
terribly. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
okay. But the slow gal is really all Kimmel has at that point is the Oiler Neches.
yeah,
He saddles Saratoga with the Oiler because it's It's all that was available at that, I guess, all available right there for that operation specifically.
Which I'm also intrigued by, and I wish I could channel my inner Sal Mercogliano. Where the heck is the Neosho? Because that was a faster vessel and a bigger oiler as well.
She
But
I, she
she's
may have been with one of
probably
the other carriers. I don't
that's
know.
probably yeah, that's my guess there. Anyway,
Yeah, but niches. The whole point of this is she could do 12 knots.
right.
That's it. And
Yeah,
that's what breaking out the friggin' oars. And she's going to, as they say, any task force or convoy, whatever the case may be, can only go as fast as the slowest ship.
there you are.
Well, Saratoga could fly. I mean, she could do
Yeah,
30 knots easy.
easy.
And you saddle a couple of DDs with her and a couple of crew, or even hell, get rid of the destroyers and just take her cruiser. She could have made it there in a rapid amount of time. Of course, she
Yeah,
wouldn't have the fuel to get back. But the Neches is going to be the one that's going to slow everything
everything
down.
down. That's exactly right. So on 15 December, the expedition makes ready to sail the Tangier. The Neches, four destroyers, sail at 17:30 on the 15th. And of course, it's a day later across the date line at Wake. Saratoga and the remainder of the escort are delayed by the time it takes to fuel the carrier. So they don't
Mhm.
leave until the following day, but of course, they can catch up to
Right.
Neches relatively easily.
Easy.
The Twilight Sortie, we have a remembrance here from First Lieutenant Robert D. Heinel, was the commander of Battery F, who is one of the Marines who is on board the Tangier. In any case, he writes that once they get beyond Oahu, suddenly we seem to be in very lonely waters indeed. Columbus's men sailing westward in hourly apprehension of toppling off the edge of a square earth could not have felt the seas to be more inscrutable and less friendly. That's a great quote.
It is.
Yeah,
That is a good quote. But you can
yeah,
imagine that was, the feeling, as these
yeah.
guys know that, the boogeyman's out there and they got to go, these Marines
Deal with.
specifically, they got
Yep.
to go deal with the boogeyman, and there's no guarantee that they're going to survive said
Yeah.
confrontation with the boogeyman. So,
Yeah, because of course the Americans at this point have very little idea of where the Japanese carrier task force that raided Pearl Harbor, I
right.
mean, they just vanished. We never
Yeah.
saw them. We never sighted them with any of our scouting assets. They, you know, it's like they had a teleporter or something and they were just
Yes.
out of there. So yeah, nobody knows where they are.
We'll talk about that in a
Mean,
minute.
yeah. Meanwhile, back in the Marshall Islands, the Japanese are keeping the pressure up on Wake all through this time because they have the advantage that Wake is basically sitting within the air envelope of all of their ground based assets that are in the Marshall Islands. So on the 12th, there is sort of a nuisance raid by a Japanese flying boat that bombs the edge of the lagoon. They actually shoot down this Mavis, and that was done by one of the F4Fs. We've at this point got a grand total of two Wildcats that are still flyable on Wake Island at this point. Later that afternoon, 26 Nells bomb Wake yet again. Wake's gunners shoot down one Nell and damaged four more, but not in any way severely.
They keep it up almost every day, and
Yep.
sometimes most days it's multiple times a day. The Mavises, which I've kind of found interesting, I didn't know that that was a thing, that
Yeah.
Japanese flying boats conducted bombing operations, but apparently they did because they did
Yeah,
it damn
they've
near
got
every
hard
day.
points under their wings and they can carry, not a big bomb load, but you can put some 100 pounders under there and that kind of thing. So, yeah,
Yeah, they hit them again on the 14th. The Nels come back again that same day, 30 of them this time.
30.
And they set one of the F4Fs afire, although the plane is salvaged and it is flyable.
So we
On the
still have two.
They've still got two, but
Got
that
two.
that that's not going to last either.
Yeah.
On the 15th, four more Mavises hit Camp One, although nothing is damaged. The following day, another 33 come back and hit Wake again, and from then on, it's almost every single day.
Yeah.
But let's talk about Vice Admiral Inoue and Kajioka because this
Yeah.
the defeat, which is what it was, is not sitting well with Inoue
New.
specifically.
No, and it's kind of intriguing too because so the admiral that's in charge out here, Inoue Shigeyoshi, is the commander of the Fourth Fleet, and Inoue is one of the most antagonistic of the pro air power admirals within the Japanese Navy. And Fourth Fleet is not a plum assignment.
Mhm.
They basically put Inoue out here because they just didn't want to have to listen to him anymore. And so, but it's intriguing because then Inoue is going to end up being in charge of a number of fairly important operations. He'll be running the capture of the eventual capture of Wake, spoiler alert, and also be in charge of the Battle of Coral Sea. Um, but yeah, obviously, what happened on the 11th is not a good look at all, losing two destroyers and several hundred men. And so when Kajioka comes back, they decide to try to beef his force up at least somewhat. So they're adding two more patrol boats to this force, and these are patrol boats number 32 and 33. These are old Momi class destroyers, which were built that they're the contemporaries of our four stackers, built
Mhm.
right around World War One. These were vessels that were commissioned, 1918, 1920. Um, by this time, they are no longer seen as frontline units, but they're pretty heavily armed and they're fast. And so they're going to be using these things eventually as sort of fast destroyer transports to bring more elements of the landing force along with them. And so, to that end, instead of trying to take this place with 450 SNLF, now there's going to be a first wave force that's going to have 900 Rikusentai and then an additional 1,100 sailors if need be. Likewise, they are now attaching the units of Cruiser Division 6. This is the oldest cruiser division in the Imperial Navy. So this is heavy cruisers Aoba, Furataka, Kinagasa, and Kako. And again, just like we had sort of prelude to the Battle of Savo Island, where we had those old light cruisers, Tenryu, Tatsuda, and
Mhm.
Yubari, are all going to be at Savo Island. This quartet of heavy cruisers, likewise, is going to be at Savo Island as well. So I just that's just kind of eerie for me. And again, this is not the A team. These are the oldest heavy cruisers in the Japanese inventory. These things have only got 6 8-inch guns apiece. So pretty underarmed for what you would consider to be a heavy cruiser, but nevertheless, in terms of heavy gun power that they can now bring to bear on Wake, this is a pretty significant upgrade to Kajioka's force. So Inoue now instructs Kajioka that you are to capture the island by 26 December, if not before. And so Kajioka now leaves the marshals. He's going to sortie again on the 21st and plans to land on Wake on the 23rd,
Mhm.
which gets us
He,
into their doctrine,
yeah, I
right?
was gonna say he plans to. So we were kind of kicking it back and forth last time as to whether or not he was landing in the daylight, or
Yeah.
theoretically, had he not been brushed away on the 11th. And it's totally he would have, because as we said, Yabari opens fire at like 05:30 or something.
Mhm.
Right just before sunrise. Actually, the sun is rising, so there's
Yep.
no question that those Rico
This is going to be
Sentai
a
would have
daylight
landed
operation.
in the daylight. Well, that ain't happening now,
No.
because I don't know if Inoue said, "Look, doofus, this is how you need to do this," or what, or
Yeah.
if Kajioka just had an epiphany and was like, "Hey, you know what? This goes completely against our doctrine, landing people in broad daylight on a beach,
Right.
on a defended beach. So maybe we should try
And
what we're supposed to do."
right. And that is their doctrine in a nutshell, is to land on undefended beaches at night. Because in the defense of Japanese infantry, once they do get ashore in a place, they are going to be very, very difficult to push off. We all
Right.
understand how obdurate Japanese infantry are on the defense, and so they understand that all they need to do here is get a toehold, and they should be able to then, overpower us once they have sufficient force on the ground. But the key is how to get that toehold. And so the plan now is that they are going to be landing these forces after dark. And not only that, they're going to be using these two new patrol boats, which are actually very old vessels, in a similar way to some of the commando raids that the Allies
Mhm.
pull off against
Yep.
France. They take an old destroyer, they load it up with commandos, and just so they're gonna take these two patrol boats and they're just gonna run these puppies up on the South Beach and disgorge this first wave full of SNLF troops. That's the plan. The other key component, of course, in terms of degrading the air power on Wake Island, is that they cut orders to basically they're calling an audible here with Kita Butai, and they cut orders to Carrier Division 2, which is Hiryu and Soryu, that instead of going straight back to the home islands with the rest of Kita Butai, you guys are going to come down here and lend support to the actual operation. So instead of periodic bombing runs by Nels, if we've got two carriers here, we can now put a constant air blanket over Wake while this amphibious operation is going on. And so Hiryu and Soryu are going to be showing up in the relatively near future.
On the 21st of December is when
Yeah.
when their aircraft show up over Wake. And like I put in the notes, the Marines were not stupid. They'd grown accustomed to seeing the twin-tailed Nels
Yep.
and the big goofy looking Mavis, aircraft. They'd grown accustomed to that. They had yet to see a single seat fighter that wasn't their own. They'd
Yep.
yet to see a Val or a Kate or anything like that.
Yep.
So when these very same aircraft, Kates and Vals and A6Ms
Zeros.
appear over Wake Island on the 21st of December, they know what that is. The
Yeah.
civilians probably don't, but the Marines do. They know that those are carrier aircraft, which means that the big boys are out there somewhere and they got to be pretty damn close. So
Yep.
we're probably going to be hit pretty dang soon.
Yep. Yeah, they have to be within roughly 200 miles of the atoll at this point. So
Yeah. Yeah.
anyway.
So once these guys, and we can, well, let's not get too far ahead, but we'll talk about this because this has a drastic effect on the relief operation. Is the
Yep.
presence of these at the very least, as far as the Navy knows, one carrier, if not more,
Right.
and we can get to that in a minute. So on the 17th of December, Wake's relief efforts suffered, as I put in the notes, a major hit because that is the date that Admiral Husband Kimmel is relieved of command of the Pacific Fleet. And as you will recall, just briefly a minute ago, we said that he was the guy that initiated this relief slash potential trap mission, if you will, to wrangle in the Japanese and also get the civilians out and get the
Yeah.
Marines ashore. Well, with Kimmel gone, there's no guarantee that that plan is going to survive the night, but as we see, it does until, of course, it doesn't. Admiral Pye, William Pye,
Yep.
Vice Admiral William Pye, is the guy that takes over SINCPAC until Nimitz comes. It was a known thing that he was only a
Yeah.
interim head coach, if you will, until
Right.
the new guy comes aboard.
Yeah, Nimitz is on a train at this point,
Yes,
going across
in
the U.S.
Chicago somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, with his aide, yeah, trying to get out to San Fran. Anyway,
On the 18th of December, Pye receives intelligence well, he was an admiral later, Edwin Layton, that suggested that Yurkito Butai is roaming the seas somewhere out there. And he had no idea where. Layton said that there was only four carriers, as we know. Of course, there were six. He said that the majority of Kido Butai is going to head home, but there may be one, two, or maybe even four. We don't know. We frankly, he has no clue. He
right.
just knows that somewhere out there there is a carrier, at least one of the Japanese carriers that raided Pearl Harbor, and then by the 21st, which is 3 days later, they get word that, oh yeah, by the way, Wake has been hit by carrier aircraft. So all
Right.
this starts to formulate in Pye's head, and Pye, who is, no offense to the man, was significantly less aggressive than Husband
Yes.
Kimmel.
Yes, he was.
He starts to think maybe
Sarah,
we're going to sail into a trap here.
right. Yeah, that's exactly right. And honestly, I don't want to fight a carrier battle against Hiryu and Soryu. Those are the two best carriers in their navy, and Saratoga has cranky elevators just like the Lexington
Hmm.
does. One carrier versus two, that does not smell good. So one of the things that's kind of biting us in the butt here is that we don't understand how to concentrate carriers at this point in
No.
the war. All of our carriers, we got three flight decks operating at this point, and they're all widely dispersed. So nobody's really in a position to back up the Saratoga at this point. And yeah, if she's facing up to she's trying to do two things simultaneously.
Yes.
She's got to run escort on the Tangier, which is very valuable, and then I'm in a position where I may have to fight a carrier battle too, and I've only got one flight deck. That doesn't smell good.
And you said that she'd be on her own, and you're 100% right, because if you actually look at Kimmel's plan, and he sends Enterprise out there to act as a
A
backup.
backstop. Yeah,
Yeah, and Lex is going to go raid at Jalowit. They're none of them are within range to where they could get to Saratoga quickly. It's not like
yeah,
Enterprise is only, 80 miles behind or anything. She's like 250, 300 miles away. So
right,
she's not going to get there right now. By the time she got there, if there was a sea battle, Saratoga might be under the waves at that
right,
point. And, so I mean, it was a bad plan to begin with, frankly. Not that it was not done with the right intentions.
right,
It was
right.
just poorly thought out, frankly.
Yeah, if you're
Um,
going to go up there, you need to take all your carriers with you.
yes.
That's really what it comes down to. To
Yeah.
me, as I was thinking about this just this morning, there are eerie parallels here to the Battle of Midway, but in reverse. In that, um, posit that the Japanese have managed to capture Midway Island. They are now in a position where they are under our land-based air envelope from Oahu. We could have bombed them with impunity with B-17s based on Oahu. And yet, the distance from Midway to Wake is something on the order of 1,200 nautical miles. And so we're sticking our necks out. We are under the air envelope of the Marshall Islands. This is a bad place for us to try to fight a carrier battle because, of course, all of those Nells that we as
Yeah.
Americans tend to look at as, well, those are bombers. No, dude, those were originally built as torpedo planes. That is their original design concept. And so all of those Nells that are busily bombing Wake now potentially could become involved in a carrier battle, and go after our flight decks. So this is a very disadvantageous place for us to be fighting a carrier battle. The other problem is scouting assets.
Right.
The Japanese have got all these flying boats, Mavises, that have
We got
got
nothing.
range galore. And a lot of people don't appreciate that during the actual Battle of Midway. I think one of our biggest advantages is our preponderance of scouting assets. We got PBYs out the yin yang that are
Right.
sitting on Midway, and that gives us the ability to multiply the firepower that are on our carriers because our carriers, in many cases, are not having to do their own scouting. They're relying on PBYs. The exact situation in reverse pertains to Wake, in that the Japanese will have an advantage in scouting assets in comparison to a single flight deck like Saratoga. So this is not a good place to fight a carrier battle, in my opinion, unless you are willing to bring all three of your flight decks out to the party, and that is not what the original plan here was.
And there's two guys that want to tangle with the Japanese. One of them's Frank Jack Fletcher, and the other one's Bill Halsey. And nothing against Wilson Brown, but to that end, his Lexington task force is part of this operation. As you said earlier, supposed to raid Jalowit and basically be like, "Hey, I'm over here," kind of a thing. Well,
Right,
on his way to Jalowit, they conduct gunnery practice, and which is a common thing, obviously. And it is discovered not just aboard Lexington, but aboard the vast majority of the ships in the task force, the 5-inch shells that were aboard those ships that had just been loaded up in Pearl are defective,
right.
and they don't go kaboom when they're supposed to go kaboom. So, in other words, they don't have much very little, if
Triple A.
any,
Yeah,
AAA umbrella. All they
yeah,
have is what the fighters that are aboard Lexington to deal with any kind of air assets that the Japanese may throw, which they know they have a
yeah.
lot of them in the Marshall. So Brown is like,
No me gusta.
I'm out, brother. I'm not
Yeah,
hitting Jallo. And he pulls, and it's in his orders. He can call an audible if he
yeah,
chooses to do so, and he does. And he
yeah,
decides to raid Macon, which, of course, as we know, doesn't happen anyway because he winds up getting pulled back to Pearl Harbor regardless.
Yeah.
So it's a
It's shaping
mess.
up. Yeah, this thing is just kind of snake bit from the beginning is kind of what it comes down to. So,
It's
in
almost
any,
like it was, again, the intentions were good.
yeah,
Obviously the intentions are good, but it's almost like he just took everything and just threw it in a pile and said, "Here, go, just take it all," and didn't really think things through. And I mean, whatever. I
yeah,
kind of understand. So regardless of this, Saratoga is still going. She's still going out there. She doesn't know any of this crap's going down. Fletcher has no idea that any of this is happening. On the
yeah.
20th of December, 21 December, wake time, despite the fact that Natchez is, the
Dog
albatross
slow.
that's dragging
Yeah,
everything down. Fletcher had actually reached the halfway point of his mission. He was now 725 miles away from Wake.
yeah.
And at this point, things start to go sideways for him too. As I put in the notes, Pi specifically restricted the sailing areas of Lexington and Enterprise, keeping them far away because he was afraid to get them sunk, leaving Saratoga on her own. She's all alone
Right.
at this point, so it's not going to happen. Um, Fletcher gets word too that carrier aircraft on the 21st have indeed raided Wake Island. So he knows, he's like, okay, there's got to be a Japanese carrier out here somewhere. They don't have any clue as to where they are. So he
Hmm.
takes his force and moves them northwest to steer clear of any kind of aerial umbrella that he might encounter because he's got to refuel his specifically his destroyers going
Yeah,
out there, and it's delaying the arrival of Tangier and Saratoga altogether. Um, the intel from Leighton continues to come in, and Leighton says at this point now there may be as many as four Japanese aircraft carriers in the vicinity. And Pi sends Fletcher a message, quote, to be prepared for possibility of enemy forces your vicinity. That's all he says. Doesn't say anything else.
yeah,
What the hell is that supposed to? Is that a
yeah.
rowboat
That's
or is that
yeah,
Kidobutai? What is that?
right. Exactly. No, that's not very actionable intel. So, yeah, not good at this point. They're even contemplating detaching uh, the Tangier at this point to just do its own solo run into, yeah, 225 or more miles, probably better part of 500 miles without any air cover whatsoever. There
Yeah.
is no way that this ship is going to survive in that threat environment. That's not a realistic thing. So yeah, in any case, the rescue mission is not looking good here. By the time you get to the 22nd or so, the intel, the tea leaves are reading very, very badly.
When Fletcher gets, because Pi says he orders, well, essentially orders Fletcher to detach Tangier and let her go on her own. And when Fletcher reads these, he's like, "What?"
Yeah,
He's like, "You got to be kidding! This thing would never make it."
no
And
way.
and he has serious reservations. Apparently, according to Lundstrom, Fletcher has serious reservations about turning this thing loose because he knows it's gonna get sunk
Yeah,
if it gets found. If it gets found, it's gonna be sunk, and every single one of those people and all those supplies are gonna die
yeah,
because there's not gonna be anybody around them. They were gonna detach two DDs to go along with
right,
Tangier as a escort,
right,
probably just to pick up the survivors,
right.
and that was
But,
it. And to the credit of the captain of the Tangier, and I don't remember his name right now off the top of my head, he was willing to do it. He's like, you know what, screw it, I'll do it. Let's go. I'll run this damn thing ashore if I have to, but I'm going to get
right.
these Marines on that beach and get these people that ammunition. So the heart was there. It's just the planning. The planning was not. All right. So on December the 20th, we're drawing ever nearer to the end here. A PBY piloted by Ensign J.J. Murphy and Howard 80. And as I put in the notes, yes, that Howard 80, same guy that finds Kido Butai at Midway,
Yep.
plops down in Wake Island's lagoon. Their job there is twofold. One, it's to assess the situation. Two, to get any kind of sensitive documents and things like that out, which is also a bad sign, frankly.
Yeah.
And the thing is too, it's as I said, to assess the situation because although we know Cunningham is sending messages back and forth, and he is, and he's really all he's doing, and I can't fault the man for it, is he's asking, he's like, I need this, I need that, I need this, I need that, I need this, that, and five of these. He's not letting anybody know that the power station's destroyed and this is destroyed and da da
which
da 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 da.
I just find incredible because, um, yeah, there needed to have been more adult supervision here in terms of what was being sent back to Pearl Harbor in terms of this is what is going on in this installation.
Yeah.
Because we're letting two ensigns, you are the guys that are in charge of making, the assessment of what the heck is going on. And
Yes.
Howard 80 doesn't have any ability to make an intelligent report on what has happened on this island. And so to me, it is just ludicrous that you didn't at least put one Marine officer, a
Totally.
ground pounder, to come in, get off the freaking plane, talk to Cunningham, and say, what's happened here? Instead, you send these two greenhorns out in a PBY to pick up the mail, do a sketch of,
That's it.
it's just this is not
I
how grown-ups run a war. It just makes no
I don't get
sense
it
to me.
either. And that's
Okay.
why I said when we were talking about FDR earlier, and I said the key phrase was as far as we know. The
Yeah,
President of the United States
doesn't
did not
know.
know what the
Yeah,
hell was going on Wake Island, aside from the fact that the Marines had fended off a Japanese invasion. That's all the
right.
man knew. And if
Yeah,
the boss doesn't know what's going on, that's a problem.
that's a
And
problem.
and
I,
to
I
your
have to.
point, yeah.
I'm pointing the finger at Cunningham on this one. I'm
Well,
he's
Pie
got to
too,
do.
though. Pie too,
Yeah,
though. So I
yeah,
mean, he could have sent, he could have said, "Hey, Colonel so and so, get on that bird and go, and I want a
yeah.
report from you." He does
Right,
not do that. None of
right.
those guys do that.
Yeah, because
And
we could do some real time history as to how old Howard 80 is at this point, but he's probably 23 years old or some damn thing, maybe 26. Yeah, he can't send.
regardless of that, he's
Yeah,
that's not his job. He's a
right. He's a
PPY pilot for
yeah,
crying out loud.
exactly. What do you know about ground pounders and any sort of infantry combat? Anyway, yeah. So,
Exactly.
oops, that's a
Yeah.
fail.
So he gets there, they get there, and they no kidding. When he gets out, and I'm not sure if it's Murphy or 80, I don't know which one, it doesn't matter. They ask the first Marine that they see, swear to God, where is the Pan American Hotel? That's how out of touch, and it's not
Yeah.
these guys' fault. They don't know any better, but that's how out of touch Pearl Harbor was with the actual situation. And the Marine is like, "Are you
Are you?
high?
Yeah.
What are you talking about? What?
Right.
It's over there. See that pile of rubble? That's it over there. Have fun."
Yeah.
And they go over there, and they're surrounded, literally surrounded by the destruction, and they're dutifully taking notes on all this stuff.
Right.
And they go meet with Cunningham, and they tell Cunningham, "A, give me all your mail, give me all your reports, all your stuff.
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, there is a relief force coming, and they're due to get here by Christmas Eve." Um, this information, spreads across the islands like the flu. You know,
Hmm.
instantly makes everybody's sagging morale lift that, oh, hey, the Navy is indeed coming.
At least
They're
trying.
they're
Yeah.
trying. Yeah, they're
Yep.
coming in for all they know that they are, just over the horizon, if you will. Um, but one of the things, I always like to touch on the human aspects. This is the first time and the last time that mail would come in or go out
Yeah.
of Wake Island during the entirety of the siege. Um, our boy Hammer and Hank Elrod sends a letter to his wife, closes it with, quote, "I am missing you terribly. I'll think of a million things that I should have said after I have gone to bed tonight, but now I'm going to say that I love you and you alone always and always." And of course, we know what happens to Hammer and Hank. So the next morning, the PBY goes, she goes back. Murphy is the one that actually does deliver the report to Pye in person, tells him that there's only two flyable aircraft left on the island. Half of VMF 211, actually, it's more than that, are
Is
dead. And as he says, Wake Island is a shambles. And
right.
this is the first eyewitness report since the civilians leave on the 8th, someone in,
Yeah.
in the Clipper, that
Yep.
anybody's heard anything from Wake, that's literally seen it with their own eyes. And this is so
Okay.
so Pi is, and we're gonna see he's like a pancake. He's flipping and flopping. He's going from one side to the next. Once he gets Murphy's report of how really bad the situation is on Wake, he decides to double down and risk Saratoga if need be to get these men and supplies to Wake Island itself. So at this point, instead of telling Fletcher to send Tangier on what amounted to be a death ride with
Right.
no air cover, he tells Fletch to give Tangier air cover, which I think Fletcher probably would have done regardless,
Regardless.
honestly.
Yeah.
But he says, now you're under orders. You get these people as close as you possibly can. Keep Saratoga about 200-ish miles away, but provide as much air cover as you can. Launch VMF 221 at dawn. And Pye's issuing orders to the task force commander to do all this.
Yeah.
That same day to search for Kido Butai, which what 221 would have done aside from say, here they are, is about the only thing they would have done.
Yes.
Because they're not, good God, would you want to get in an air battle over Kido Butai with F2As? No, thank
Nope.
you.
No,
No,
thank
thank
you.
you. Um, this is all happening on the 21st of December. Fletcher is still in line to arrive, well, to have Tangier arrive off of Wake's coast by Christmas Eve. That's
Right.
still like the timeline is still laying that out on the 21st of December. As I said, the PBY with 80, it leaves Wake's last two F4Fs take to the air. They're piloted. One of them's piloted by a gentleman named Lieutenant Davidson. He gets shot down, or actually just goes missing.
Missing.
So we,
Yeah.
we don't know what happened to him. There's only one F4F now. It's piloted by Captain Freuler. He shoots down a Japanese Zero, which is confirmed, but he's jumped by another aircraft. Obviously, this is going to be Kido Butai because he's jumping. He's fighting
Yeah.
carrier aircraft. Somebody shoots him up pretty good. The aircraft lands on Wake, and it's shot up so bad it's never good. It's not even a hangar queen. It's never going to fly again.
Yeah.
Wake now has no
No air
air
cover.
cover, none
That's right.
at all, none at all.
Yeah. Meanwhile, of course, Kajioka is coming, and
Yes, he is.
he is going to be relying. He's going to be relying basically on surprise and brute force to take this island the second time around. So he is, as we said, he's going to be landing at just before dawn in three waves. The first wave of 700 soldiers is going to land via patrol boats. Those two patrol boats, 32 and 33. And they're going to purposely ground themselves on the southern beaches of Wake Island. And basically, at that point, the guys are just going to, I don't want to say jump off, but get
Well,
off as
yeah,
rapidly as
kind of.
possible. They will then assault the airfield, sweep the resistance aside at the airfield, and then head inland. Meanwhile, another 200 troops are going to be coming in via small landing craft near Camp 1 at the western tip of Wake and in the middle of Wilkes Island. Once they've got a beachhead established there, the second echelon of 1,100 soldiers is going to land on the island and then finish off the defenders. They're going to use a bombardment by two of the cruisers, will occur at Peel Island so as to draw attention there. And if all else fails, he intends to run his other destroyers aground and have their crews fight as infantry. So, yeah, Kajioka at this point does not want to be seen as insufficiently aggressive. It gives you a sense for just how little esteem they put in those older destroyers. I kind of get the two patrol boats. I mean, these are pretty
Sure.
old destroyers, but some of the others in the inventory are old but not that old, and you're willing to lose six or seven of them
Yeah.
apparently. You know, anyway. Um, Meanwhile, on the Marine side of things, Devereaux has his men spread out, but they're spread very, very thin. There just aren't that many people to cover this island. He also predicts that the Japanese are going to try to land on the southern beaches, and so that's where he's got the
Sure.
majority of his beef. And he is also then putting another group of people at Wilkes Island because he assumes that their southern beach on that island as well will be the target. So Platt is out on Wilkes Island. He's got 70 men there that are mostly clustered around the 5-inch and 3-inch batteries. Makes good enough sense. They got 450 cals guarding the beach and two more automatic weapons are around the North Shore. Around 0200, they
Mhm.
begin noticing gun flashes out at sea. And intriguingly, the Japanese are using their cruisers. They are shooting what they think is Wilkes Island, but actually is not Wilkes Island. It's wave
Right.
tops.
Yeah.
And that premature bombardment gives away the presence of the Japanese landing force to the Americans, so they now know that they are coming.
Yeah. At 0 to 30, machine gun fire is heard on Wilkes Island or in
Yep,
the direction of Wilkes Island. And at 0 to 50, Cunningham sends a radio to the commandant of the 14th Naval District, which is Claude Block. And he says, quote, island under gunfire, enemy apparently landing. And it
yeah,
said apparently landing. And again, because this is the bugaboo of the Americans on Wake, the greater royal wake, is communications suck.
yeah,
And they do. And I mean, we talked
yeah,
about this last week. Is that they're communications by phone and the wires are exposed.
yeah,
So any kind of shell fire, any kind of Japanese with a bayonet can cut those wires, and then you're out.
yep,
And
exactly.
it's going to be a bad situation. So indeed, the Japanese are landing, and they do land on Wilkes. And just so everybody understands, a lot of this stuff happens simultaneously, but in order to kind of keep everything in one cohesive,
Narratively,
yeah, we're going to focus on each island individually. So we're going to focus on Wilkes first. On Wilkes Island, there was a Marine gunner named, last name McKinstry. He contacted Captain Platt and told him he was sure that something was in the surf. Well, Platt tells him immediately, "Well, shoot it."
right?
And when he does so, he doesn't see anything, and it is pitch black out there. And these
Yep,
guys, neither the Japanese nor the Marines, can see squat. They can see nothing.
yep,
What the Marines do have are searchlights, and Platt orders one of the searchlights to kick on, and when they do, it just happens to sweep across a section of the beach where there is a Japanese landing craft, and there's about 100 or so guys jumping out of this landing craft in the middle of the pitch black darkness, running towards McKinstry's 3-inch gun. Um, they
they
wind up getting
shoot this.
good.
Yeah, they shoot the searchlight out almost
They do.
immediately.
Yeah, yeah.
But at least we
They
know where they are. So
we
yeah,
know that they're here.
yeah, right.
They get so close to the 3-inch gun that so fast that they can't use the 3-inch gun to
Suppress it.
shoot at the Japanese because they can't, as you said, depress the weapon. So they start cutting loose with 30s and 50s, and but they can't see anything. So they're literally shooting blind. McKinstry had 4 guys in that one position, and he realizes pretty quick, he's like, we're gonna die. So they pull out and they go back to a pre-established defensive line, which is, I don't know, 50, 60 yards inland, because again, Wilkes is not a big place.
Yeah,
And he forms a skirmish line, and the Japanese do reach that skirmish line pretty quickly. And when they do, McKinstry and these other Marines that are already there, they stop them cold.
yeah,
And they just kind of hold tight. The Japanese wind up holding tight there, and things start to spiral out of control on Wilkes for the Japanese.
right.
Because once the sun rises, Captain Platt, who we've talked about a pretty good amount, he's an aggressive dude. He's a Marine captain. He's ready to rock and roll. He's not going to go down without a fight.
Yeah, yeah. So what ends up happening is actually that Platt ends up counterattacking in small groups. He's got himself, 6 Marines and 2 civilians that are draped in 30 cal ammo bandoliers. That look like Pancho Villa and his sort
Right.
of guys. And yeah, what ends up happening is that they take his 8 man. He's got another 14 man section that's in a 130-foot long line, and they start doing your standard, fire and maneuver sort of gambit, where you've got one section laying down automatic weapons fire to cover the movement of another section, and they keep inching forward. And in the process of doing that, they begin encountering groups of Japanese, and they begin wiping them out.
Yeah. Yeah. They begin tearing them up. And I love this. Is that Platt is walking, he's at the front of the column or the front of the line, and he's got a 1911 in each hand. Like like Jesse James, just
Get
walking
some.
down and just
Yeah,
bam, bam. I
right.
mean, just dropping guys. This is a bad dude, man.
Yeah,
He they wind up getting close enough to the Japanese around a 3-inch gun like not far from where they landed, and McKinstry and his people pulled out, that the Japanese never saw them coming, and they had turned towards, and I can show a map. I will show a map. They had turned with their backs towards the beach, and just so happens from the direction where Platt was coming. So they didn't see them until Platt and his people were on top of them practically. They start shooting up into the bushes, and the Marines start shooting up into the bushes. And then there's one gentleman, Corporal Johnson, who is hand carrying a water cooled 1917 machine gun, which is not a light weapon,
Weapon.
firing that damn thing from the hip, shooting into the bushes, and whenever he hears a scream, he just
Shoot more.
he just dumps more bells. He runs into, or as they're pushing forward ever so quickly, actually, the advance is relatively fast. Johnson runs into a bunch of Japanese that are huddled near the 3-inch gun. A bunch of guys are underneath one of the American trucks, 20 of them, as a matter of fact. And Johnson just starts, he calls it a machine gunner's dream. He just starts working from the front of the truck to the back, and he
Just
dumps
murders these
what,
guys.
four belts of 30 cal into these 20 guys underneath this truck,
Yeah,
and kills 18 and seriously wounds the other two, all
right.
by himself. um it just it
Yeah,
just
yeah,
waylay these Japanese here.
yeah. And so the bottom line is that as a result of these counterattacks by the various American groups, we basically clear Wilkes
Yes.
Island of resistance. And so by 0740, the Japanese on Wilkes had been exterminated by these counterattacks, and
Hmm.
98 Japanese are dead on Wilkes Island alone, defeated by a force of roughly 40 Marines and civilians attacking together in groups and exercising sound infantry tactics against them.
Yeah.
There just weren't a lot of places to hide in the the sand dunes and the grass is kind of what it comes down to. So
One of the things that I found in looking at some of the personal accounts for this is that a lot of the Japanese, when they came under fire, especially from behind, a lot of the Marines who survived, of which there were only, they took seven, Marines took seven casualties, seven killed in action in this
seven
fight.
killed. Yep.
They said that the Japanese just froze, like they just froze, and they
Yeah.
didn't clearly didn't expect an attack from the rear. Number one, and number two, when it happened, they just kind of, like a deer in headlights, they just stopped, and
Right.
the Marines would just, oh, if you're going
I'm
to stop, I'm going to kill you, and they
gonna
just kept
murder
rolling.
you.
So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Exactly. Exactly. Which does not say good things about the professionality of the Second
no,
Maizuru SNLF force.
not at all.
Which again, when we tend to sometimes to refer to the NSNLF as Japanese Marines, they kind of weren't. I mean, the
No,
quality of these units was extremely variable. There are occasions when they do put in a very good performance, but this unit is just not performing very well at all.
no.
I don't know what's going on here. There's a lack of command and control on the Japanese side, or what? Maybe some of their officers got killed, and it's just privates that are roaming around, and these guys don't know what to do. I don't know, but this is not a very good performance. Just again, in terms of basic infantry tactics on the part of the Japanese on Wilkes Island.
By 3:30 that afternoon, there are no live Japanese on Wilkes Island.
Yeah,
Platt and his people have completely, as you said, cleared the place, because after
wiped them
they
out.
kill all these dudes that are by the 3-inch gun in the truck, they, obviously make sure everybody's dead, and then they Platt sends out patrols to scour the island to make sure they haven't landed over here or over there, because they
Yeah,
don't know, and they find nothing. And when they do find, a handful here or there, they kill them. So there is nobody wearing a
yeah,
Japanese uniform that is, well, they're two that are wounded, they take them prisoner, but there's nobody that's going to harm the Americans on Wilkes Island that is breathing air at this
yeah,
moment. The Marines kill all of them.
yeah.
However, there is another landing, as we know. You alluded to that a
Bigger
little bit,
landing.
big time. Patrol
Yeah,
boats 32 and 33, quite literally, crash ashore on Wake Island not long after the fighting on Wilkes begins. It's maybe 10, 15 minutes after, if that. Um, Same thing on Wake. The Marines can't see Jack because it's so
squat.
dark.
But you can
Um,
certainly hear it when a ship
yes, you can.
beaches itself a
Yes.
couple hundred. Yeah, it's funny that makes a noise, and so Yeah, it is the noise of those two patrol boats grounding themselves that alerts the Marine defenders to their presence. And one of these ships lands almost directly in front of Lieutenant Robert Hanna's five 50 caliber guns and the 22 surviving members of VMF 211. Just that number right there, five 50 calibers, man, that is
That's a
nothing.
load of ass whipping right
That
there.
is
It's
bad
what that
news there.
is.
Yes, indeed.
Whew.
They got a handful of civilians, a few sailors from the Naval Air Station. Devereaux had given Hanna 10 more Marines, six civilians, and 40 1917s to add to his defense. And nearby, he's got a single 3-inch gun pointed towards the beach. Doesn't have sighting equipment, but even if you're firing over open sights against a beached warship, a multi-hundred-foot long warship, gee, you can actually hit that sucker. And yeah, that's kind of what they start to do.
That is precisely what they do. When he sees or realizes that the Japanese have landed via these crash boats. Oh, and that's another thing. One of the guys on one of these Japanese, I forget which one it is, 32, patrol boat 32. When they crash ashore, some cat gets out and hangs a lantern on the bow of the ship.
Shoot me, shoot me.
Shoot me now. Shoot me now. And that is precisely what Hannah does. He goes over to the 3-inch gun with a crew of two civilians, and they just start pumping rounds into this thing.
Yep,
Um, he has the civilians alternate shooting and loading, and he's watching with a pair of binocs and adjusting fire. First shot goes right over the boat, but the second one and the remaining 21 shots are dead on. He shoots, I think, 30 times and hits it an estimated 21 times in
ouch.
all of maybe 5 minutes. I mean, they're just pumping rounds into this thing. At some point, they hit some sort of either fuel storage or ammunition storage or something on this patrol boat, and this thing goes kaboom.
Yep,
And when it does, of course, the resulting fire that happens also ignites or illuminates rather the other
yep,
patrol boat that's down the beach, and it
right.
too comes under fire.
Yeah, absolutely. So now they're going to go ahead and start pumping rounds into that second boat. This is Patrol Boat 33. And so not only is this patrol boat under fire from this 3-inch, but of course they're using all the 50 cals, which a 50 cal, um, a 50 caliber machine gun will take apart a wooden house. I mean, this is a
Yeah.
big, heavy slug. And as the Japanese are going to discover at places like the Battle of Bismarck Sea, man, 50 cal will also puncture relatively thin steel for a ship. You can probably get rounds through the hulls of these patrol boats, would be my guess. And so the result is that both patrol boats 32 and 33 are basically turned into a meat grinder for the Japanese. Um, and so the survivors from that are on the beach and moving forward, but very gingerly, obviously, because they need to be keeping their heads down because they're under heavy automatic weapons fire at this point. So at this point, Devereaux now orders VMF 211's Major Putnam to go ahead and take his men, and who are now actually acting as infantry, and reinforce Hanna's position. And so Putnam, with a large group of civilians, moves out. The Japanese, likewise, now having larger numbers, are beginning to advance under this Marine fire. But because of that advantage in numbers, they also had the ability then to try to flank Hanna, which is this classic Japanese tactics. Fix your opponent in place with a frontal assault and then work an attachment around one of the flanks and give it to them, which is going to lead to then hand-to-hand combat between the
Mhm.
Japanese and some of these men under Putnam's command.
Yeah. And, like the Marines are fighting off every attack. Man,
Yep,
they do. They stop everyone that comes at them with heavy casualties on the Japanese side. But like I put in the notes, with each attack, they're expending ammunition, a lot of
yep,
it. And
yep.
that ammunition, because I mean, the automatic weapons that these people had, that the Marines had, was, exorbitant. And they're not probably practicing very good fire
Fire
discipline
discipline.
yeah, at this point in time. And I
Yeah,
can't really say as I blame them, but the ammunition's starting to run low, and that's going to be a major problem very soon. That fight at the airfield or near the airfield rages for 90 minutes
Hmm.
without stopping.
Yep.
Or if there's a pause, it's, a minute or two. And each time, even though the Marines do fend them off, the Japanese get a little bit closer and a
Yep.
little bit closer and a little bit closer. And once they get too close for comfort, the Marines do pull back to the western edge of the airfield. Lieutenant Cleaver is a guy we did not talk about last week, but he is credited with sinking a Japanese submarine. He doesn't. He
Mm.
hits it. He hits it, but it winds up sinking as a result of a collision, not because of Cleaver. But regardless of this, he is also in this fight right here, fighting for close range, at close range with the Japanese for over an hour. At the other end of the American line, a gentleman named Lieutenant Poindexter. He comes under rifle, grenade, and mortar fire, as you said earlier, neither of which the Marines have. There is
Yeah,
no
exactly.
artillery
My
at all.
guess is that they're taking fire from these little 50 millimeter grenade projectors that the Japanese love to use. I forget, it's
Knee
a Type
mortars is what they're
92, or
called, yeah.
yeah, we call them knee mortars. They were nothing of the sort, but it's a very handy little weapon. And the ability for the Japanese to put down indirect fire on our lines, and we cannot respond with either 60 or 80, 81
Yeah,
millimeter mortars, means that we got a problem here. And the result is that even though Poindexter is able to hold his position, he eventually is going to be obliged to fall back, just because, again, he's under indirect fire that he cannot respond to. So
right.
um, he pulls out about 55 guys and begins bringing them back.
He brings them back all the way to Camp One, which is a fair amount of distance from where he was.
Right.
And they set up a defensive line out there because, he's not running away. He's just setting up to, to a more holdable position. And he holds this position for like 2 hours.
Yeah.
And the Japanese don't come. And Poindexter is much like Platt, he's very aggressive and he realizes, well, hell's fire. If they're not coming, well, let's go to them. And
Let's
that's
go get them.
exactly what he does. He takes those
Yeah.
55 cats that he pulled out of there and he says, everybody grab a rifle and let's move. He says, and I quote, if we were to fight to the last man, we might as well die on the attack. Let's move. It's a man right there.
Yeah.
He divides his Marines, 55 guys, into roughly three squads, and they move right down the damn road, parallel to the beach. And their advance is significantly slower than Platt's was, mainly because they start running into some really dense underbrush, and that just
Hmm.
slows them down. They do take fire, and of course, they have to eliminate said fire when they take fire. And it's taking them, excuse me, a very long time to get where they want to be, but they're making progress.
Yeah.
And they wind up getting to a point where they do stop because Poindexter can see at this the same time a large pack of Japanese heading down the main road towards him, waving a white flag. And at this point, he's like, maybe, maybe we've won the day. So he
Right.
orders his men to halt, walks out in the middle of the road, grabs his 1903 Springfield with one hand, and just stands there and waits on these dudes to come to him. That's a
Right.
bad man.
Once
Let's,
again,
yeah, go
just
ahead.
the impressive thing here is the aggressiveness of the Marine defense. And
Yeah,
fast forwarding again, one of the things that you see at the Battle of Alligator Creek, likewise on Guadalcanal, is that the Marines are never content to just sit back passively on the defensive, that they are always looking for an opportunity to counterattack if at all possible. They're very aggressive, small unit tacticians, and that is going to pay tremendous dividends down the road for us. Again, the contrast in that sort of behavior to some of the things that you see happening in the Battle of Malaya when we start talking about that, which is, I hate to say it, a much more passive defense on the part of the British. We just don't see that here with the Marines. These guys are pretty, steely eyed. That's kind of what it comes down to.
yeah. Burn the
Unfortunately,
fight.
they're also massively outnumbered. So,
Tremendously outnumbered, unfortunately.
yeah.
The guy we mentioned before, Lieutenant Hanna, Robert
Yep.
Hanna, he's still holding his 3-inch gun position despite being attacked God knows how many times. Um, the last one of the last attacks kicks off 20 yards away from Hanna's position, but the Marine fire and civilians who are now, right up there with the Marines
They're mingled. Yeah.
cut these guys down, stop that advance. half the distance. So now they're only 10 yards away from Hannah's position. He realizes at that point, he's like, we can't hold this. We're only, these guys are 10 yards away, for crying out loud. We got to get the hell out of here. He orders everybody back. Um, Hannah and a bunch of his guys, however, decide they're going to stay. They huddle near the 3-inch gun, and he tells them, quote, we'll make our stand here. This is as far as we go. So in other words, we're going to die here. We're
Yeah.
not going to move. And at that point, the Japanese start to close in. They typical, I hate to say it like this, but typical Japanese infantry tactics, they don't care about the enemy fire. They're running right at it. And I think it's at this point where the Japanese have probably had enough
Yep.
of dealing with Robert Hanna and this 3-inch gun and these Marines and the civilians. So they just run headlong into this fire right here.
Yeah. Exactly. And at this point, too, the this group of Americans is now essentially out of ammunition.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, the end is now here. John Sorensen is a civilian, and he is next to Elrod. He runs out of ammunition and starts throwing rocks. Standing up, he is immediately cut down by Japanese fire. Elrod at this point stands up and yells, "Kill the sons of bitches," and is firing from his hip with his Tommy gun. Um, but yeah, they're out of ammunition once he goes through that box, and that's pretty much the end. And at
Yeah.
this point, this entire group is cut down by Japanese fire.
You know, it's one of those Hollywood scenes, where you think, the Marine stands up with the Thompson firing from the hip, kill the sons of bitches and wading into the fire. And one could imagine that it probably would be if it weren't for the fact that the Japanese remarked after the battle that there was a very large American, and Elrod was a big boy with
Uh-huh.
a Thompson submachine gun firing from the hip, advancing into the Japanese fire. Was it Elrod? Probably so, frankly, is
Probably
from
so.
all accounts, is that it was more than likely was Henry Elrod wailing his Thompson from the hip, rolling into Japanese fire, and then, running out of ammo and flinging grenades
Grenades
all over the place. Um,
until they
and of
finally cut
course,
them down.
yeah, that's when they kill him. That fight around the 3-inch gun lasts for 5.5 hours.
Wars.
5.5 hours for Hanna and his people around the 3-inch gun that the Japanese tried to dislodge these people. And Hanna at this point is down to 3 rounds in his 1911. Um, and he looks at one of his guys and he says, "Where's the cavalry now?"
Right.
And as we know, the cavalry is not coming because not long after the Japanese land, Cunningham sends a message to 14th Naval District, and it says, and it's famous, it says, "Enemy on island, issue in doubt."
In doubt.
And that has
Yeah.
a drastic effect on everything that happens after it, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Because as soon as that message comes in to Pearl Harbor, it's one thing to move a relief mission in if the island is still being
Sure.
held by friendly forces. It's completely different if now you're basically looking at having to re-invade this island and do that in the face of Kitabutai and ground-based air power. That ain't happening. And so, whereas Pai just a few hours ago was relatively resolute in trying to run this rescue force in, now he is vacillating once again, and understandably so. But the bottom line is that he's not going to make this decision. It's going to be made for him
Yeah.
back in Washington, D.C., by both Betty Stark and Ernest King, which on the face of it is a bit of an eye opener because, of course, we always think of King as being a real fire breather when it comes to his
Hmm.
level of aggression. But the bottom line now, in the opinion of both Stark and King, is that Wake is becoming a liability and that instead efforts should be made to reinforce Midway. And so at 0730 on the 23rd, Pai pulls the plug on the orders basically of Washington, D.C., that we're cutting our losses here, is kind of what it
Hmm.
comes down to.
Yeah. He, bottom line, they didn't know what the heck was waiting for them there. And,
Yeah.
a lot of people pin the decision to not go forward with the relief mission on Pi. But as you just said, the decision had been made for him.
Yeah.
And it's key to understand too that both Stark and King were the ones that said we're done. This is before the Japanese land, or actually before they knew that the Japanese landed, but it's before they knew that the Japanese had landed. So even King and them, they were like, this is becoming a pain in the ass, and unfortunately, these guys are going to have to hang out to dry. Um, Pi apparently, from what I was able to decipher, had a conversation as to whether or not they should indeed continue with the mission because
Right.
Fletcher was pretty close. He was, I don't know how many miles, but he wasn't that damn far.
Yeah.
And apparently his subordinates were about 50-50. It's like we 50, half of them were saying we should go, half of them saying we should come home. Um, the fate of the Saratoga is what ultimately hung over his head because Pi
Yep.
knew that he was there really just to take care, to mind the store until the
Right.
boss came in, and losing any one of those three flight decks would have been catastrophic for the U.S. Navy in the Pacific at that time. So he reluctantly does give the order. Apparently, Fletcher and Aubrey Fitch, who was also aboard Sarah at that time, they are not pleased at all,
Yeah. It's
to the
absolutely
point of
devastating.
like taking their caps down and throwing it on the deck, and a lot of
Yep.
cussing and a lot of
Yeah.
bitching going on here.
Yeah. This is a very unhappy moment. Yeah, and they're actually hoping that the sink back will, think better of it, and so they end up loitering around in this general vicinity to see if there are going to be any new orders, because of course Pi has been vacillating here for the last couple
Right.
of days, but yeah, nothing ended up coming over the wire as far as new orders, and so they at this point turn around Task Force 14 and they start heading home. So yeah, there is going to be no cavalry.
No cavalry at all.
Yep.
Um, and we talked about lack of communications on Wake, and this is where it really comes to bite him in the butt. Um, Cunningham and Devereaux, neither of them knew exactly what was going on
Right.
because the phone lines had been either cut by the Japanese or hit by shell fire or both or whatever. It didn't matter. As far as Devereaux knew, everybody on Wilkes was dead. And they
Right.
were, but they were wearing Japanese uniforms, not American. But he didn't know that.
Yeah.
He did not know that. All he heard was machine gun fire and rifle fire and grenades and whatever going off. And he just assumes like, well, these guys are probably smoked. They're gone.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that is the morning when the Japanese landed at night, in order to not be bombed by their own people, they set up these little flags all over the beach.
Yep.
And that's all Devereaux sees. He looks through binoculars. He sees no movement because Platt and his people they're hunkered down.
Yep.
And all he sees is these little Japanese flags all over God's creation. And he's like, well, clearly they've taken the island.
Yeah.
He did not. They did
Wrong.
not.
Yeah.
So
Meanwhile, his own ammunition situation is
yes,
dire. He's
yes,
running out
big
of
time,
stuff. Yep.
big time.
So yeah. And likewise, from his vantage, Devereaux can look out there, and there are 20 Japanese warships, loitering offshore, including a quartet of heavy cruisers. How are you gonna,
Yeah,
possibly fend off that force? At this point, your own force is seriously degraded, and they're not coming close enough that you can use your 5-inch guns on them. So yeah. Um, they have a little powwow, and Cunningham and Devereaux, they talk about surrender without actually ever using the word.
right,
But Devereaux finally tells Cunningham that you're the commander of this overall installation. I'm just the commander of the Naval Air Station here. It's your call to make. And Cunningham says, "Well, I guess we better give it to them then."
yeah. Devereaux. There's it's interesting too. If you read some post-war accounts between Devereaux and Cunningham, you know, each one of them blamed the other one for
Mm,
waving the white flag. And exactly to your point, it's Cunningham's decision. He's
yeah,
he's he's the boss,
he is the
and
superior officer. I mean,
yeah,
yeah,
Devereaux cannot say, "Hey, we're surrendering,
right.
Commander." Doesn't work like that. So, I
Yeah.
mean, bottom line is, whether whoever says what, at the end of the day, it's on Cunningham to surrender this force, and that's exactly what he does.
Yes.
Devereaux is then, or Cunningham orders Devereaux to go out and make this
Pass
happen.
word and yeah.
He comes out, and he says to his runner, or several of them actually, pass the word, we're going to surrender.
Right.
Um, one of these guys stands outside and just starts yelling, Major's orders, we're surrendering. And Devereaux apparently, like literally, he's crying and he starts screaming back at the runner. He says, "It's not my orders, God damn it."
Right.
He had no intentions of surrendering. Apparently, seeing the anguish in the man's face, many of his Marines come up, pat him on the shoulder, shake his hand, and say, "Don't worry, Major. You fought the good fight. You did all you could," which is freaking heartbreaking, man.
Yeah.
Absolutely heartbreaking. Um, the word passes down the line to the Marines, who are still holding their positions, mind you, with the exception of
Yes.
two or three,
Yeah.
and they are flabbergasted because they're
Yep.
like, "We just beat the hell out of these people, and now
Yeah.
we're having to give up."
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's shocked is the word.
Yeah. Not a happy situation. So when Hannah hears the news of this, he he takes the magazine out of his 1911 and throws it on the ground. He looks at Devereaux and says, "This can't be happening. Marines don't surrender." But they had, obviously. Next, they've got to get a hold of Poindexter. And, he's the guy that has been standing on the road waiting for this group of
Yeah,
Japanese to, he was
to come
assuming,
to him.
yeah, he was assuming that the Japanese are going to be surrendering to him. As this happened, a Japanese climbed the water tower and ripped down the stars and stripes, and enraged Marines began running towards the tower. And at that point, Devereaux is obligated to say, "Hold it, keep your heads. Don't do anything stupid at this point." So the biggest surprise, of course, is going to be Wilkes Island.
Yeah.
So when they finally get out there, Devereaux boards a small boat with some Japanese. He motors over to be met by Captain Platt. As Devereaux approaches Platt's lines, he yells, "Lay down your arms. The island has been surrendered." Platt jumps up and yells, "Who the hell gave that order?"
From his viewpoint, you can understand.
Right,
These people just killed everybody on the damn island. They were
right.
firmly in control of that island.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
nevertheless. Um, yeah, that's the bottom line. Platt asks, "Major, do you know what you're asking us to do?" And Devereaux responds, "Yes, tell your men to lay down their weapons. It's an honorable act." Platt takes his 1911 and throws it onto the ground and stalks off.
Yeah.
So,
It,
not a happy time.
not a happy time at all.
I get it, but the bottom line is that the final outcome on this fight the Japanese are going to win.
Right.
The Americans are running out of ammunition.
Yeah. That's the
And
key there.
that's the issue. And the Japanese at this point have the ability to reinforce effortlessly, and the Americans there's a finite number of bullets on this island that the Americans can shoot. It's clear that if the Japanese decide to take this place under heavy gunfire, they're just going to wallop it.
Right.
And they still have several hundred soldiers ashore at this point. So, as harsh as it is to say, um, what happens at the end of this fight if we don't surrender?
Right.
You know,
It was inevitable, is
it
what
was
it is.
inevitable.
It was inevitable. They were going to either surrender the island or they were all going to be killed because,
Yep.
as you said, there's a couple hundred ish live
More.
Japanese on wake right now.
Yeah.
And by the way, there's 1,100 more sitting
Yeah.
offshore that Kajioka was ready to run in, quite literally, run in there
Hmm.
should the need arise. And frankly, if those couple hundred that are still alive on wake get killed, that need would have arisen. And one
And
would
we
think that he
don't,
wouldn't have hesitated, but
right.
we don't know.
We don't know. This is one of the critiques I sort of lay at MacArthur's doorstep when he's infuriated by the Navy because the Navy won't run supplies into the Philippines. Why can't they just put stuff on transports? Like, because the Japanese dominate the waters off of the Philippine archipelago. It's just absolutely ironclad. The same situation pertains here at Wake. The Japanese have now established ironclad air and sea supremacy off of this island. We can't reinforce it. We are going to run out of bodies and bullets at some point. And the potential result of not surrendering is that this Marine contingent is wiped out by the Japanese. And to what end? What military gain have you provided for the sacrifice of those lives, other than somewhere down the road, some American producer gets to make another movie about the Pacific Alamo where the entire garrison is wiped out. It's really not worth it. I hate to say it. Um, Maybe that goes
Well,
against, Semper Fi, but that's my take.
well, as we're gonna see, and I mean, and God, look, 100% straight right now. The defense of the island was nothing but heroic,
Absolutely.
and those guys kicked that ass not once
Very
but
competently.
twice.
Yeah,
But Wake becomes nothing for the remainder of the war. So,
right,
and we can get into this in a second, but of course, Fletcher was supposed to get there on Christmas Eve. Well, the Japanese land on the 23rd, so
right,
that wasn't going to happen anyway. But
right.
just in an alternate universe, let's say the Japanese decide to land on the 26th, because in a way it said you have to have this island by the 26th.
Hmm.
If the Marines get there, I mean, if Fletcher gets there on Christmas Eve and everything unloads and they get the civilians the hell off the island, what are we going to use Wake for? Because we
Right.
don't use the Japanese don't use it for anything hardly, for the remainder of the war. Hell, they're still the same damn guys on there in 1945.
Right.
So
Yes,
it's
which is an interesting point too, because we mentioned this in the first episode, that these SNLF units are very ad hoc. As soon as this SNLF group that captures Wake succeeds in capturing it, they immediately get turned into a base defense force. And
right.
again, that would never happen with the Marines,
Yeah.
U.S. Marines. No, those are assault troops. We're going to use them for another, sort of assault down the road. We're going to bring in other people to garrison this stupid island. So that's another point of contrast here. Yeah, we're just not going to hold on to Wake. I don't think. And like I say, the addition of 200 new Marines, but then subtracting 1,000 civilians that could keep those positions in repair and whatnot. I don't know. I just don't see us long term being able to hold on to Wake. If the Japanese want to take it, they're going to be able to take it
Yes,
again because they are able to exert
they have the
air
assets.
supremacy. Yeah,
Yeah, they
no,
have the
no can.
assets.
Right, they got the assets and we don't.
And if we do get the people ashore and they do, let's say they fend off another attack. Well, it's
Right.
only a matter of time because
Yeah.
we don't have the naval assets either, by the way, to really do much of anything at all. So once
Yeah.
these guys, these 200 so Marines get ashore, that's it. That's probably all
Yeah.
they're going to send out there.
Yeah.
So it's,
So again, it is sort of a midway in reverse that, okay,
right.
congratulations, we still hold this island, but it is
Now
sitting
what?
under an enemy air envelope and we can't really reinforce it effectively. There's no fresh water, it's
No,
just, yeah. I
no,
suppose
it's a
we could have
hellhole.
run submarines in there with supplies. That would have been a possibility. But of course, the Japanese have got the ability to keep their own submarine force engaged and make sure that we cannot run in, ships like the Tangier or something like that on a regular basis. It's just this
Yeah.
is going to be a really, really tough place for us to hold. Is kind of what it comes down to. Yeah.
So Wake, as we said last week and again this week, the Japanese thought it was going to be a walkover. It most certainly was not a
Mm-hmm.
walkover, and there's differing numbers here. And this goes back to a conversation you and
Vastly
I had
differing.
big time, like more than twice the numbers. John Wukovitz,
Yeah.
who's a fantastic historian, he
Yep.
estimates the Japanese dead to be, and he just gives a ballpark because he doesn't know exactly. He estimates them to be over 1,000, and
Right.
that includes
The
the human
destroyers.
losses on the two destroyers that were sunk on the 11th.
I buy
He
that.
ballparks, yeah, yeah, he ballparks about 500 ish killed on the 23rd of December,
Right.
which is a lot of guys killed. Now,
Mm-hmm.
Rich, who's our mutual good buddy, who may or may not watch this episode,
Yep.
says 39 Japanese are killed in the air, 111 are killed ashore, and 394 at sea. I don't doubt the 394 at sea at all because
Mm-hmm.
we already talked about the destroyers and everything else.
Yep.
But there's over 98 Japanese bodies counted on Wilkes
Wilkes alone.
alone.
Yeah.
And that's just Wilkes. And we
Right.
know that Hanna and Elrod and Poindexter and all those guys waylay the Japanese on Wake as well.
Yeah.
So whether 500 is the right number or not, I don't know, but this goes
Paul
into the
Paul Dull, from his battle history of the Imperial Japanese Navy, I believe lists 140 SNLF lost. And the word lost there is ambiguous. Is that killed? Is that killed missing? Is that
yeah,
killed missing wounded? It's unspecified. I would like to see the Japanese sources, is kind of what it comes down to. And unfortunately, don't have the Senshi social volume on this particular fight, and yeah, didn't have a chance to even run my phone over it. The numbers are really, really squishy as to how many the Japanese lost. I agree with you that 111 ashore, 100,
mhm,
even 140 ashore
yeah,
feels light to
very
me.
light. Feels
Yeah,
very light. I mean, just from the fact that, damn near 100 of them are killed on Wilkes alone. And that's not
right,
just Marines counting that, by the way. That's the Japanese counting that as well.
right.
So the number's got to be, I say it's north of 250, but heck,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Particularly given the fact that, one of the patrol boats explodes in the
Yes,
the course of unloading troops. Yeah, this feels
very
multiple
light.
hundreds. Yeah,
Yeah,
to me.
yeah, I
Anyway,
100% agree. The one
yeah.
thing that is known are American casualties. There's 124 Americans are killed in this fight, 49 military, most of them are Marines, some sailors are included in that, and 75 civilians. Most of the civilians are actually killed in the bombing attacks.
Hmm.
And there are some killed in combat for sure, Sorensen being one.
Yeah,
VMF 211, the Chamorros, and the contractor suffered the highest casualty percentage
right.
of the Americans on the island itself. Um, I found this pretty interesting. Of course, Japanese post action say, Wake was easily captured. Da, 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 da. Well, there was a Japanese journalist in with the wave of Japanese who landed right in front of Hannah's 3-inch gun. And he wrote that there were mountains of dead and rivers of blood. And the fight for Wake was one which would have made the gods weep.
That doesn't sound like a walkover.
No, it does
No,
not. Not at
no,
all. So, before we wrap it up, overall effects on the Japanese offensive plan for early 1942. What does Wake do, if anything at all?
nothing.
Nothing at all.
Nothing. Yeah, again, if I look at the just sort of the grand strategic situation, again, this offensive is all aimed at the South.
Hmm.
Really it all comes down to how quickly can we capture Indonesia and grab the oil that's in Sumatra. That's really what it all comes down to. So the fact that Yay team, the Marines held on to Wake Island for 2 weeks longer than the Japanese thought they were going to hang on to it, has no material impact whatsoever on the course of events down south in places like Indonesia. It just doesn't matter. I hate to say
Right.
it.
Yeah.
So
And the expenditure of Japanese manpower, ammunition has no bearing on anything because after this, those guys, as we said, they stay there. And then the
yeah,
Japanese naval forces, as you said earlier, they live to fight another day,
yeah.
and most notably in the Solomons.
Hmm.
But bottom line is that it was a place that, could never be held, no matter how much heroism is abound on
Yeah,
Wake
and,
Island.
and and that needs to be parsed very carefully, because I think you can say again in the short term, okay, another 200 Marines, man, they might have won that fight on Wake Island on the 23rd just
Sure,
outright, just
sure.
defeated the Japanese. But in the long term, this
That's the
island,
key.
yeah, that's the key. Um, yeah, it is sort of depressing because the aggressive part of you is like, you know, we damn near won this fight. With another couple hundred, we could have held on to this place. But again, to what end? To what
Yeah,
military end? Does this then become a sump for American power trying to hold on to an atoll that at the end of the day really is fairly useless militarily? And that's how we started this whole episode. You'll recall, when the Spaniards found this place, is like,
right.
this place is useless. And you're sort of back to that evaluation of it from a military standpoint here at the end of this episode.
You wonder when Nimitz comes in, because he comes in not long after all this goes down.
Yeah, like 4 days,
He comes in and that's one of the first things he gets word of is, oh, hey, by the
two
way,
days.
we're, Pye's not Pye, Fletcher's force is coming back, and Nimitz
Yeah,
just kind of rolls his eyes. But if we do land people on there again, and if we hold off this, does Nimitz commit men and material to keep going in there, or does he commit and just enough people to get him the hell out of there? That's a question that we'd never know the answer to, but
yeah.
I'd like to think that he would not commit men to hold a place that is, you know,
He was a very calculating dude, and you see that in his battle planning for Midway too, that he issues explicit instructions to his carrier commanders that, yeah, we're not going to do or die fight for Midway because at the end of the day, the carriers are more valuable than the island.
mhm,
A, of all, I think that my Marines can hold that island regardless, and B, even if they can't, the Japanese will never be able to keep it in supply for
much like
all of the
us
same,
at
much
Wave.
like us. So yeah, if I were a betting man, I would bet that Nimitz would try to do a relief mission to pull the Marines out and just
Agreed.
and bring them. I'd plunk them down on Midway or whatever, put them on places that are more important to defend.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, that's my guess.
I
We
would
will never
agree as
know.
well. We'll never know.
Yeah,
All right. Well, that
excellent.
that wraps this long episode.
Puppy up.
All right. Anything else?
No, sir.
Cool. All right. Well,
Let's
with that, we want to go ahead.
let our listeners off the hook.
Yeah. Y'all go get a coffee and
Yeah,
hit the head
get
because we're
ahead.
about to do the same. So, with that, we want to thank you very much for listening and or watching this episode of the Unauthorized History of Pacific War podcast. Give us a rating and review. We do appreciate it. As of today, well, a couple days, the Q&A session send in is over. We're
Yep.
going to be scheduling that hopefully in the near future. And we'll let everybody know when that happens, but
When I
it'll
get
happen.
back from Japan and all that good stuff. Yeah.
Probably be end of October or sometime, but
Yeah.
you guys will know. So anyway, all
I
right.
and I don't when is this planning to come out? What date do you think?
Heck if I know.
Okay. I will just say one last, I'm going to be down in Texas at the Audie Murphy World War II
Oh, that's
Roundtable on
right.
the 23rd of October. So I don't
Yeah.
know if that'll make the air by date or not, but we'll
I
see.
don't know either. Frankly, I'd have to look. I don't know. It might. It might. But if it does and you're able, go see John.
Yeah.
So, all right, cool. So my name is Seth Barrett. I want to thank you very much for listening in or watching. John, my friend, thank you as
Yep.
always.
John Partial, thanks so much for tuning in as always, and we will see you again next week.